Look in the morning. It is Tuesday, February 25th, right here on Jocks 94.5, 7 a.m. as we get you going. And going to talk some college basketball today with Andy Burcham. He will join us thanks to Craneworks at 8 a.m. We will recap Auburn's weekend and look ahead to the week and maybe just to kind of get talking about the rest of the regular season. Alabama in action tonight. They've got Mississippi State at home, a team that they kind of pushed Bama a couple weeks ago, Greg, over in Starkville, but one that being at home and having a little bit of extra confidence coming off that Kentucky win, you feel like Alabama should be in good shape tonight at Coleman Coliseum.
You also know, though, that Mississippi State's been one of those teams that has been a little bit of a problem from time to time. I feel like in a normal SEC year, Mississippi State would be excellent, right? But for whatever reason, this year with the depth of the league, with the quality of the league, they're kind of stuck in the middle. Doesn't mean that they aren't capable of beating anyone that's 1, 2, 3, or 4. But it also doesn't mean they're not capable of losing to anyone like Oklahoma, Georgia, LSU, and South Carolina. We've seen that happen before as well, as referenced by the loss to Oklahoma just the other day. So this will be a tough game. They're all tough, but a good opportunity to play in front of the home crowd and one that Alabama should handle.
When you go back to what we discussed yesterday with Richard Hendricks, just turnovers, allowing Mark Sears. I thought it was interesting what Richard said about maybe Sears' sort of alternate role on this team and where he can be a little bit more comfortable. And then defense. And he said plain and simple, it comes down to those three things, and that when Alabama's doing those things, they're going to be nearly impossible to beat. It's been proven most of the time this year. Do you have confidence that that can consistently show up through the rest of the regular season and in the postseason?
I feel pretty confident. I just feel like this team is one that has and did last year occasionally go through the motions in this part of the calendar, went through a little bit of a slump. And then once the tournament got here, it was like a completely unrecognizable level of effort on a night in, night out basis. So I'm not really going to press the panic button. I think there's a lot of veteran leadership on this team. I do think there is inconsistencies on this team, but at the same time, I think last year's team was more wildly inconsistent than this year's team. And last year's team made a decent run. So I think connecting all those dots, I still feel pretty good about where they're at.
So there's some interesting discussion around college basketball that has been happening recently. Mike Krzyzewski, who has a show on SiriusXM, has a podcast as well, has recently discussed, well, he discussed before the season that he had these 5 wishes that he was hoping he could kind of finalize or finish off for college basketball before, I guess before he leaves Earth. I'm not really sure what the sort of end of the road there was as far as when he was trying to push this out. But one of those wishes, Greg, was for the ACC and the Big East to merge in basketball. And it's gotten to the point now where Val Ackerman, the commissioner of the Big East, has now have to reference this interview on interviews that he has done. Rick Pitino, who obviously having a great year there at St. John's, has come out and said that he thinks this would be an amazing idea, thinks it would be fantastic. He's all for it. He wants to see it happen. Obviously has coached in both leagues, so knows both very well. But Ackerman said, I don't think it's a crazy idea. He appeared on John Aron's The Varsity podcast and said, when you got 2 Hall of Famers opinioning about not only the history of college basketball, but the future of college basketball, you have to listen. I take very seriously any idea around the future of college basketball, what it means for the Big East, what the Big East should be doing. I'm not sure I can say much about it right now, what sort of combination would look like, but we've got some related ideas that we're hatching here around alliances about who we should be working with as we look to secure not only the future of the Big East, but the future of college basketball. I think on the surface, this sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
These are 2 great historic basketball leagues. 2 leagues that from a basketball perspective could stand on their own, no doubt about it. Combined would give you obviously a lot of scheduling power and would give you some of that inventory that's so valuable. Now, I think when you go further down the road, the extremely complicated portion of this is easily going to be the media rights situation, because we know you don't see a lot of Big East games on the ESPN family of networks.
Yeah.
That is mainly controlled by Fox, and the ACC obviously is controlled by ESPN. The Big East deal is through 2031. And as we have talked about from a football perspective, the ACC deal runs through 3,057. So I don't know how you would kind of siphon off that portion of it. If somebody's just going to say, okay, let's rip this up and start again. Yeah. That essentially has happened. So it's not crazy. But the really non-crazy part of this, Greg, is that if football does keep going down the path it appears it's going and sort of becomes its own entity, this could be something that's extremely valuable down the road.
Yeah, it's going to happen. I think at some point the ACC has to look for additional revenue streams. The problem is basketball's not worth anything. Like, relatively speaking, what is basketball worth? I guess you could look at the Big East deal with Fox, TNT, Turner. You can look at that deal and say, all right, that's comparable to what the ACC basketball revenue would be. Then you'd siphon off a portion of the basketball revenue, separate it from everything else, combine that into one pot, and then you pay everybody based on that one pot. I think it'd be pretty simple to figure out how to do it too, by the way. I feel like if a game's being played in a Big East venue, it's on Fox and Turner. If a game's being played on the ACC venue, put it on ESPN. I don't feel like that's that difficult. The other thing too, hopefully
you would have an even number of neutral sites and you can just draft those basically. If you,
yeah.
We've seen drafting for, I mean, you and I did the XFL when it was relaunched a couple of years ago, and certain games were on Fox, certain games were on ESPN, and you draft them out, decide who goes. We've talked to the guy who handles scheduling for us before, and sometimes when you have two entities sharing the same league, you just draft those games throughout the year. Okay, number one, Ohio State, Michigan, no questions asked. Okay, number one for us, Iron Bowl, no question. Whatever it is, you kind of go that direction. So that's not impossible either.
Not impossible, but I don't think ESPN's going to want to see North Carolina hosting a game in the Dean Dome involving, Marquette. Like, I don't think they're going to want to see that played on Fox or NBC. They're not. They're going to say, I think ESPN would protect the following. They would protect Duke. They would protect North Carolina. They would protect their fair share of the others. But for the most part, those are the only two that they really, really care about, I think, when it comes to basketball. Now, does Florida State move the needle? Sure, to an extent on a given year. Maybe. Clemson, Elite Eight appearance last year, but not exactly a traditional basketball power. I think NC State has its fair share of followers as well, but let's be real. I think the Big East would benefit less than the ACC would benefit from in this situation. Like, if I were the Big East, why would I take part in this? I'm already a basketball destination. You look at the teams that populate the Big East right now, and every single one of them is relevant. I mean, moderately speaking. All right, am I like sitting down and grinding on
DePaul?
On DePaul and Seton Hall? No, but they're all relatively relevant. I mean, whether you like basketball or not, I've seen Butler play for championships. I've seen Providence as a mainstay in the tournament. UConn's been a dominant force in recent years. I've seen Creighton that's in the tournament every year. St. John's is amazing now behind Rick Pitino. Marquette has been rock solid for forever. Xavier's been in the tournament forever.
Georgetown has
Villanova's won multiple championships. Like, all right, it's good that Duke and North Carolina are great, but tell me this. Yes, Virginia has a championship in recent years. Miami's had a couple decent runs. How good top to bottom, the point of emphasis here is the ACC in basketball today. I'm not talking about 7 years ago when Syracuse was relevant and North Carolina was good, and Duke was amazing, and Georgia Tech was good, and Miami was good with Jim Larinaga. Like,
I understand where you're going, and it's fair, but I think here's what's hard about this practice is we're going to look at those Big East teams, and the only value that they could even possibly bring to us is going to be basketball.
Correct.
So we're going to look at some of these ACC schools, and we're going to completely overlook Miami's basketball program for the most part. We're going to overlook what Pitt has done in basketball for the most part. We're not going to pay a ton of attention to what Florida State does, even though it's really good some years, just because, and same thing with Clemson, kind of like what you said, because it's going to be overshadowed by football, and it's going to cloud some of the discussion around it. But if you go back and look, like if you want to talk about Georgetown being a historically significant basketball program, or Marquette or Providence, which I would agree with you that they are, I think you also have to talk about Pitt that way. I think you have to talk about Wake Forest that way. We know we've seen Louisville in the Final Four semi-recently. Take Duke and North Carolina out of it. I do think Georgia Tech has to be discussed that way. Obviously, Virginia, we know what they are. Syracuse definitely is going to be talked about that way. I mean, they almost deserve to be discussed with Duke and North Carolina. I mean, Cal has made some nice runs. It just hasn't been in the last 2-3 years. So
hasn't been in the ACC.
No, that's that's an ACC school now.
What about Stanford?
I can remember Stanford having some good basketball teams.
They had some good basketball teams. What about SMU with Larry Brown? He's still coaching there?
I don't have the
dollar if you can name the head coach of SMU basketball.
Yeah, I don't have the historical significance right now of SMU basketball.
I'll give you a hint. Dunk City.
I don't remember any of the guys' names that played on that team.
Andy Enfield, he's the coach. He was at USC not that long ago, but now he's the coach at SMU.
So I don't. I think what you would get
he said, I don't remember any of the guys that were on that team. Why are you so down on Florida Gulf Coast? That place ripped. They had a lazy river between their student union and football stadium.
Why wouldn't you go to school there then? I just don't understand. I think what you're looking at here, if you're the Big East, like when you reference the value, and I kind of understand where you're going with that, and it makes sense. But if I'm the Big East and you are essentially a smaller league, in essence, in the grand scope of it, you are. I look at what's happening with the SEC and the Big Ten right now in football, and I look at treacherous waters ahead. Like the sea is dangerous, and not sure that if we have a boat big enough to be able to handle that. So if people are going to start strategically scheduling around everybody else to box them out per se, which I think is beginning of what's happening right now, then you better find some people to play ball. Because what's your inventory going to look like when you can only schedule, the Big Sky and I don't know, the Coastal? Yeah. I mean, if CUSA and the MAC are the only ones that'll play ball with you down the road, and the Metro Atlantic, your inventory is not going to be extremely valuable. If you're playing ball all of a sudden with Carolina and Duke and Wake and Georgia Tech and Florida State and Notre Dame, who we haven't mentioned yet, but remember from a basketball perspective, is involved there. Yeah. And Syracuse and Miami, like all of a sudden your inventory skyrockets. And for you just to have, if you're Fox, you're all over this because you're like, hold on, all of a sudden we get Duke on our network. I don't care where the game's being played. I don't care if it's in front of 300 people. Like we'll take Notre Dame on TV. We'll take North Carolina on TV. And you're getting it on sale. I mean, if you look at the deal right now, this is crazy when you think about it. And it's not some ridiculous amount of inventory. You have about 150 regular season games that's going to NBC, Peacock, TNT, and then Fox gets another 80. So it's not some outrageous amount of games, 225, 230, 240, whatever. The fact that those games, the college basketball package for the Big East is worth about $75 million a year. $75 million a year. Keep in mind. All right. So that, just in case you were curious about, the distribution, the Big East has 10 schools? No, 5, 10, 11. They have 11 schools. So they're taking home about $6.8 million a year per school for basketball. The SEC is distributing roughly $70 million, $80 million. The Big Ten between 70 and 80. So if you're thinking about, okay, well, basketball, how do we make sure that basketball matters? Basketball accounts for about 1/10 of the overall revenue, which is mind blowing. So let's now translate that to the ACC. The ACC, I believe every school is making about $40 million. Thereabouts, $35 million, $30 million in that vicinity. So if every school is making $30 million, that means you siphon off about 7 of that for the basketball. If you're trying to equate what the Big East is distributing their schools, then I don't think it makes financial sense.
because there's no way, if it's 1/10 of the revenue is for basketball, then that means that the basketball is paying for about $3.5 million per ACC school. And the Big East is at 7. I don't know how you make the math work, frankly. Like if we're going down the sports business conversation.
No, that's the part of it that I think becomes very convoluted and very confusing if you were to try to make this happen. But what I do think is a positive is that you have one of these smaller leagues. We referenced this a little bit yesterday. You have one of these smaller leagues whose leadership is at least out looking for things in a creative manner to keep their hopes alive and to try and generate as much revenue as possible moving forward. Whereas I do believe that there's a lot that are just sitting out there trying to hold on for dear life.
Yeah.
Keep us a part of March Madness. Give us some auto bids. Give us the 1G5 to the playoff, and we'll be good taking our, 0.007% or whatever it is of the overall revenue wheel. Certain people have to begin to take the Brett Yormark approach to this and start looking ahead to what could be next and looking at just different creative ways to generate revenue. And I don't think enough leaders are doing that. So I actually give Val Ackerman credit for not only listening, but maybe even as he states, beginning to investigate this, putting pen to paper and trying to figure out different ways that he could possibly make this go and make this a real thing. And even if it's not just this that becomes a real thing, but something similar to it that gives them advantages moving forward. That's what I think we need more leadership in college basketball, college sports doing, that I'm not sure that there are many of them that are. And if you're not looking ahead because you lack energy, or you're getting poor sleep, or you feel on edge, it could be the effects of low testosterone. Game Day Men's Health wants to help you with that today. Here's what they're going to do. You go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com. You schedule a free consultation. That's right. No charge up front. They're going to give you a free PSA test and give you a free testosterone test. Also, peptides now available at Game Day Men's Health. They have a lot of different mixers, a lot of different things that can help you out with different things, whether it's skincare, whether it's energy, whether it's sleep, a lot of different ideas that they've got for you to be able to help your overall daily health each and every day at Game Day Men's Health. 10% you can save on any service by mentioning Cube when you walk in the front door. They have weight loss programs for you. Get that no-charge consultation now at GameDayMen'sHealth.com that comes with the free testosterone and PSA test. Ask about the peptides at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. All right, when we come back, shift this conversation over to some college football and how it might be affected by what we just discussed next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. All right, you can be a part of the show, 800-239-9569, 800-239-WJOX. You can also tweet in at Mac and Cube. Be a part of the show there. Greg Skipworth tweets in here at 7:21 a.m. Tuesday, February 25th on Jocks 94.5. Does the G5 disappear from the playoff conversation? And do they go and form their own playoffs? We mentioned this a little bit yesterday, Greg, and it's one thing that I have said for quite some time. I'll spend a lot of time talking about it on my podcast this week, just that, and I kind of referenced it going to break there. There has to be leadership that's forward thinking, that's beginning to look ahead. And I understand that maybe finding the backing for it would be difficult, but if there are not leaders at that level of collegiate sports, maybe not as much for March Madness, but that are not looking ahead to form their own version of the college football playoff, you're going to be lost. You're going to be in big trouble one day.
Yeah.
Because the power brokers are going to continue to walk away from all this. And what are you going to do? You're going to be stuck.
Done.
So do they disappear from the playoff conversation? Let's just stop it right there. Do you believe that they will? Yes or no?
Yes.
How long will that take?
10 years, maybe less.
So before 2035, you think that as it stands today, obviously different things could happen, but Memphis, UAB, San Diego State, Boise, Akron are no longer in the playoff conversation.
I think that will not happen at some point in the future. Yes. I just think time. Oh, think about compounding the sheer quantity of revenue over the course of 10 years and how gigantic that gap might be in 10 years. I'm not saying tomorrow. It's already big. Imagine what's going to be like in 10 years.
Yeah, it's totally fair. Cajun Barner actually brings up a good point, tweeting into the show. I think a few years back, I read media deals are with conferences, all sports, spread the love. My 4-year-old daughter loves to watch gymnastics on Friday nights. I don't think they made it to ESPN without a package deal. But I do think that the networks knew that was a lot of potential inventory that they could go get from softball, soccer, specifically with the conference networks. Gymnastics obviously has become a big deal and become more than watchable. I'd like to see the numbers on gymnastics, Greg, and that's, I guess, one of the difficult parts is if your media rights deal is rough numbers, $100 million a year, and you do air, let's say 20 gymnastics events a year.
Yeah.
And 5 soccer games, 30 basketball games. How does that revenue get split up? How do you show the value because most of these gymnastics events are close to sold out. I mean, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, LSU, they're selling tickets to these things.
Right.
And it's not like the roster is 50 deep. I would imagine that has one sport that has gotten a lot closer to evening out. Now, I know travel's still travel, but compared to what it was 10, 15 years ago, I would imagine it's totally different. So I don't know how the meter moves on the value or who gets what from a revenue sharing perspective across all the sports.
Well,
how you would assign it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's very hard. But in this particular case, you actually have the value of what the Big East basketball is worth. Like, we know that Big East distributes about $6.8 million to their member institutions a year. So that should tell you exactly what the basketball is worth. I mean, that's your comp. So if you think that the ACC, $6.8 million, you siphon off the total income provided. I think that seems a bit high, if you want me to be honest with you. I think it'd probably be a little lower than that, given that football is about 90% of the revenue that's created for the university's athletic department. Still, looking at all of that, still going to be a little interesting to kind of do the numbers. There isn't a gymnastics exclusive contract out there with some conference. It's not like you can say, oh, well, the Big 12 sold their gymnastics rights to True TV. Like they didn't. But the Big East, we have that. Right. So I think it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, if you want me to be honest with you, I know people won't want to hear it, but It probably costs networks money to televise a vast majority of the sports. They're not making money putting sports on television. They're losing money. But they do it because it is part of what the rights holder, the SEC in this case, it's what the rights holder wants. Like, you think they're making money by producing a basketball game that airs at 11 o'clock local on Sunday morning? You think anyone's watching that seriously? Like,
sure, a few people are.
Over under 3,000 people.
Close.
Under. But in all seriousness, like that costs money. Talking about the uplink and the data and having, paying hourly people to run the cameras and having a producer that's on site that's doing it, like that costs money. So yeah, they lose money on most of these sports. And I don't know about gymnastics. I would bet it's probably about a break even because they only do one a week. Right. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, and I think you do have a lot of people that are in town maybe for another sport that could help in different ways. Like, if a lot of times gymnastics in town, basketball the next day. If it's the same network, you may have some carryover there somehow, some way of how you're going to operate. But it's from the school's perspective, I think gymnastics would be an interesting study as to where it is financially versus where it was a decade ago. Because
I think gymnastics is a very healthy sport.
Yeah, because of some of the revenue that is now being gained. I think softball probably similar way. You may have to go back 20 years on softball, but that's a sport that 20 years ago I would imagine generated next to nothing, and now potentially could be past break-even status. Just because you get great attendance, and that includes parking, that includes concessions, and maybe not from just the television perspective, but you're getting a lot of people to show up, and there are a lot of different ways for them to go out and generate other revenue around their communities. So it'd be an interesting study to see. I don't know the numbers on it, but as you stated, that's part of what comes with the value of some of these other deals that are so much more than what we just referenced from the Big East. But what it is going to be, it's going to have to be something that changes. It's going to have to be something that looks different. And I want to ask you a question that was posed to me, but in a little bit of a different way, and that is, if I made you the czar of the group of five, we'll call it, because I don't really know what else to call the next level of college football, how would you manage this moving forward? If you had the means necessary to put it together, what would you attempt to motivate all of those schools to do if they were to move out of the current system and into their own? And they would probably need Crocker Moving Services first and foremost to be able to help them with that.
Yeah, it's Crocker Moves for the local company owned by an Iraq War veteran, Eric Crocker. Crocker believes in hiring movers you can trust to complete full background checks and run drug tests on every single employee. These are good guys, and you can trust them in your home, whether you need your whole home packed up and move, your company headquarters moved across the country, or you just want them to come rearrange your living room. These guys got you covered. They also do deliveries for furniture that you've purchased and need to get to your homes. Call visit them online today for a free quote. The website is crockermovingservices.com. That's crockermovingservices.com. Support your veterans by choosing Crocker Moving Services for your next move.
So I want to ask Greg that question. We'll discuss that portion of the future of college athletics next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 7:33, Tuesday, February 25th, right here on Jocks 94.5. Where would you go next with the group of five if you were in charge of that portion of college football? We'll leave the other sports out of it for now because NCAA March Madness, obviously the College World Series, we've seen some teams from that level have some success. I feel like some of those spots are going to be stripped here moving forward of automatically being able to participate. However, could still find their way in and be able to make runs. Maybe you push that aside for now. Let's focus just on football. 800-239-9569. You want to be a part of this discussion. 800-239-WJOX. Get you on the Buyers Right hotline. If I gave you the power to do it and I told you had the financial backers to assist you with it, Greg, what would you sit down and try to push people into or force people into or convince people into from a college football perspective of how you'd manage the season and the playoffs moving forward?
If I could take your money and do whatever I want with anything, I would do this with college football. I would change the calendar completely. I would move everything up to week 0. I'd play 10 regular season games. I'd play 9 conference games. The one game that I would play outside of the conference would be scheduled by a third party for matchup purposes. I would make sure that we had compelling television. But it might not necessarily always be best versus best. I would maybe take, the 5th best Big Ten against the 1st best SEC and the 2nd best Big Ten against the 3rd best ACC. Just some randomness, kind of a draw. I might even make it a made-for-TV type of situation. Like, hey, you are playing, boom, fill in the blank. Then we would proceed to play 9 weeks in a row. After the non-con game, that's week 0. Then we'd have a bye week. That bye week would serve as an opportunity to kind of assess everything. But you'd play 10 straight. So now you're looking at a, early November finish. Bye week, so mid-November, things get going. And then for the playoffs, 16 teams would make it. Our first round games would be played on Friday, Black Friday of Thanksgiving. That'd be 4 games that day, 4 games the following day on Saturday. And they would be unaccompanied windows. So it'd be scattered. We might even play a game on Thanksgiving, depending on how things sort out with the NFL and where the NFL is at. But since we're coming off bye weeks, we could do this even as early as Wednesday. We can play 1 game on Wednesday or 2 games on Wednesday, 2 games on Thursday, 2 games on Friday, 2 games on Saturday. And then the following week, first week of December, we're going again. Boom, boom, done. 2 weeks off. On the 15th, thereabouts, we would play the semis, and then we play the national championship on January 1st.
What would you try and put in place or either instruct or basically dictate to from a conference perspective or an alignment perspective on how you sort of set this out? Would you leave that to the leagues on their own? How would you try to manage that part of it?
I would remove all scheduling from the conference office, and I would remove all scheduling responsibilities from the athletic directors.
So if you're saying I'm going to put up $850 million a year for this, I control the scheduling.
Yes,
which is what I think they need somebody.
I'm the
to
captain
do.
now.
No, I think they need that
badly.
That was going to be the main direction that I was going to go. Is if this is me, roughly, and you put me in charge of it, I'm going to go and say, all right, we're going to take the entities that we have that do have some historical significance, and we're going to push you back into those. Maybe we bring back the Southwest Conference. We bring back the Big East in football if they want to be a part of that, whatever that is. I'm going to push you into your conferences. We're not going to go from the West Coast to the East Coast to play one non-conference game. We're going to bring regionality back. We're going to force those teams to play one another during the regular season. And then I like your postseason model, which we will utilize moving forward. But we're going to keep regionality. We're going to keep it somewhat local for travel expenses to be able to stay low. Obviously, we want fans to be able to go to different games back and forth. And then we're going to take those pods, and that's how we're going to help seed them throughout our postseason. And that's how you sort of manage it moving forward. But I just, to me, I understand that we have to have the billionaire that's going to be able to put up the money for this, or the network that's going to be able to put up money for this. But it has to be something that's talked about because, number one, I think it would be good football. Number two, I do think people would watch it, especially if you strategically place some of those games where there's not a ton of other inventory. And because you're going to have a postseason game on that people like us are always going to look at and say, yeah, I'm going to go watch that.
For sure.
Or if you get a Memphis versus a San Diego State playoff game, I think most average sports fans versus regular season NBA or an early season college basketball game are going to say, no, man, I want to see how this is going to look. This is postseason football.
Yep. Team's
going to move on to the finals. I'm going to see what that's going to look like. So I think you can make it viable.
Do you think 10 games in the regular season is enough?
Yes.
I do think there'd be some pushback there. Because now think about the amount of revenue that's created in stadium.
It's a lot.
Or in the community around the stadium for every single home game. And you would essentially go into a 10-game schedule. You would basically lose 2 home games at least for big schools.
Yeah. And I'll continue to use this example. Our friend, Wright Waters, who was once the commissioner of the Sun Belt, told me a long time ago, these are only numbers I know to really reference it by. But when BCS payouts were a big deal, remember when we go to bowl games and BCS they get a BCS payout. It was like $8 million. That was massive for schools that landed that. Like we cared more about that than we did who they were playing or who was going to opt out or who was going to play. It was all just the fact that what schools were getting these BCS payouts. It was 7, 8, 9 million, whatever it was. And he said, people talk about how great that is. He said, you get a home football game in some of these bigger stadiums, Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, whatever that is. He goes, you can multiply that times 5 or 8.
Yeah.
That they're taking home just on that weekend.
Oh, easily.
But to reference it is everybody made a big deal about getting that check. And he said those schools are getting 4 or 5 of those checks on that day.
Yes.
Even if it doesn't have to be sold out. So that's how important those home games are. I use another example of I did a makeup game between Akron and South Carolina on the day of the SEC championship game. I think it was Terry Bowden's last year at Akron. And I can remember asking the South Carolina administrators, like why are we doing this? It was rainy. The weather was miserable. It was going to be on just before the SEC championship game, which was kind of cool as a lead-in. You got other football from the Southeastern Conference. But I can remember Ray Tanner, Greg, having a conversation with him. He said, you don't understand. He said, we have to have this game to meet our fiscal year. Like our budget has to have this game. It doesn't matter if it's 10,000 or 90,000. Like we have to have it. So that put in perspective to me kind of where some of these athletic departments are. And once again, where people think that all the ADs are Scrooge McDuck walking around with $100 bills falling out of their pockets. It's just not real.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
But you brought up a point that I think would be instrumental in something like this happening. And it's the person in charge essentially calling the shots.
A singular head of college football.
Right. And if he wanted to have a committee that worked with him, or there was a committee that put it together, but having 17 different functioning brains of how to operate, I would think needs to be something that goes away.
Well, not only that, but also, 17 people that are looking out for their own best interest. And guess what? It's their job to look out for their own best interest. I think it's hilarious how people characterize Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey and Brett Yormark and all these guys as if they're, oh, these guys are so selfish. How about Greg Sankey's job is to protect the interest and the rights of 16 schools? He doesn't care if the MAC decided to fold their tent tomorrow and never play college football again. That does nothing to affect Greg Sankey and or Tony Petitti and or Brett Yormark. Doesn't matter. Doesn't make a difference to them. Their job is to protect their schools. So I think it's amazing to me that the SEC, the Big Ten, that they've given as much as they have. They don't have to do any of this. I actually think it's quite charitable by allowing these conferences to still be in the discussion.
For certain things, I think a lot of people would agree with you that it is kind of them to allow them to be able to continue to compete. I think there are other folks that say it was built on that, and those conferences should have the right to be able to have one play in. But that's going to always be a bit of a tug of war.
There's no right to anything. There's
none.
What right do they have? There's a right. There's no birthright that you get to compete in the college football playoff.
What right does the Big Ten have to get 4 teams in?
They have the biggest brands. They have the deeper pockets. They could swing a bigger sword.
No denying that.
I mean, if I poke you with the toothpick and you poke me with a gigantic sword, who's going to do more damage? Now, I can poke you hard with the toothpick. I might even draw blood.
Potentially.
But I think you could probably hurt me with the sword, assuming you don't hurt your back first.
Depends on if it was the field turf at Las Vegas in the preseason.
Ooh, shots fired. But in all reality, like, what right does the Big Ten have? They don't really have a right either. But guess what? They call the shots.
Right.
It's
what it is. So, but there are certain people that look at it as, well, this tournament was built on automatic qualifiers from other leagues, that it should stay that way. I understand a portion of that, but
the
then
1 year of automatic qualifiers that we've had,
you roll it to I'm referencing more basketball.
Oh,
you look at, on the flip side of that, from a business perspective, what do you have that you can bring to the table? So therefore, we're going to put ours in because that's what we're bringing to the table. We're going to bring you some more added value to the table here at Jocks. I want to introduce you to our friend and wealth advisor, Tad Hill, somebody who, if you spend some time around him, have an understanding of how he and his company operate, you're going to want to trust them with your money. If you are 10 years or less away from retirement, you need to get in touch with Tad Hill today. He's the co-host of the Retire with Freedom radio and TV shows in Birmingham and Huntsville. Also been designated by Forbes as the #1 financial securities professional in the state of Alabama multiple years running. Tad, what do you have for us today?
Thanks, Cole. Today I want to talk about something that's usually on everyone's mind, and that is taxes. How do we reduce our tax burden as much as we possibly can? And one of the things that many of you probably don't know is that taxes are actually on sale right now. When the current laws sunset, taxes are going to go up. So if you've got a lot of tax-deferred money, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, when that money comes out, it's going to get taxed at your highest marginal tax rate. If you've never had anyone analyze if you can get that money into tax-free accounts like Roth IRAs, we cover how to do that in detail in our retirement course that we teach at our office on Valley Dale Road. If you'd like to sign up for the next course, text JOX, J-O-X, to 205-988-0006, 988-0006.
This is a paid placement. Investment advisory services are made available through AE Wealth Management. For more information about Forbes rankings, visit Forbes.com.
7:48, February 25th, right here on Jocks 94.5. Rick Morton tweets in, the college football plan at Greg McElroy gave this morning is emoji 100 underlined twice on point. There you go.
We back.
Coach D. Reynolds tweets in, avoid I-20 West and any back road going west from there. It's a solid traffic update, Coach. We appreciate that.
Ayo.
We have folks listening in that sometimes don't hear Drick Ray in the commercials, but want to keep you updated on if there are spots, places that you need to avoid and not go. Jolly tweeted in a little bit earlier, educate me, if basketball is not a moneymaker, why aren't the media deals separated from football and basketball?
It is a moneymaker, but it accounts for about 10% of the overall revenue.
Yeah, not the moneymaker, or money making in a very different clip than obviously football is. Would
Correct.
you agree?
Yes.
Do you think some of these media deals, if things go the direction that they are going to be broken up in the future? Can it be? Can it work that way? Can the schools and the conferences allow it to be a football media rights deal and then an everything else deal? Or maybe even it goes to football, basketball, everything else.
I don't think it'd be very smart for basketball and or any other sport to break away from football.
What do you think?
Drafting off of that.
What would the schools want to do? They would want to keep it all together, correct?
I think the schools have a little bit more of an egalitarian approach. I think they care very much about trying to create. I really believe this, and maybe I'm naive. I could very well be. But I really believe that the schools care greatly about making sure that all these athletes have a chance to go and, I don't know, create value for themselves. Like I think they care about keeping it all together and making sure they provide opportunities for students to play a sport.
Yeah, providing opportunities essentially.
I think they really care about that.
At their school, at their university, to wear that logo, to wear that jersey, to represent that, to be able to go and garner new eyeballs and new fans at different portions of the calendar of the school and of the school's brand and the school's logo.
Correct.
I do believe that that's important to athletic departments. And unfortunately, so much of the conversation rolls into, well, what are they bringing in, or what do they make, or how much are they worth, or what's their value, or private equity, or getting a check, or NIL. That's just a large portion of where the conversation is today. But I don't think you still lose money on certain sports. I know what Title IX is. I know it's real. But I do think it goes past Title IX specifically to a lot of SEC schools as to some of those opportunities that are brought up that don't bring money back to the school. I mean, there are sports at Auburn and Alabama that could be dropped, and you'd still fit under the Title IX umbrella.
Yeah, all but two.
But, okay.
And not fit under the
they're still
Title
out
IX
there.
umbrella. But, yeah. You can drop baseball right now.
Men's tennis, men's golf.
Yeah.
Whether they win a national championship or not, they're not making money. So
it's not about that.
That opportunity portion of it, I do believe, is real.
But everyone acts like there's these college administrators. They're also greedy, and no, they're not. Like, if they really want to be greedy, we'll show you greedy.
Well, I'm not going to say that there's no greed involved, Greg, but you almost have to be if you're going to survive. What are you going to do? Sit back and watch and be in the spot that the ACC is in right now? And be begging and pleading every day to get out of your deal and have schools taking you to court to get out of your media rights deal? Like that doesn't feel like a great place to be. If you're going to be relevant, you almost have to be greedy to an extent.
You're right. You're right. And I don't have a problem with a little bit of greed. Because that greed is born out of self-preservation. It's a different type of greed. Like greed born out of self-preservation is one thing. Like I have to do this to survive. Greed born out of, well, we could just torch the world because we are technically the dictator. We can do whatever we want. The emperor has no clothes type of greed. That's a different animal. And I feel like, and like I said a million times, I really believe that college administrators care greatly about sustaining the model. I really think they care about that. And I might be naive, but I think they care about that. So I feel confident in saying that they'll always do what's in the best interest of their league. But at the same time, they really will try to find a middle ground to make sure that everyone can continue to coexist.
Seems fair. Seems like kind of where things are headed and the way that it's going to look in the near future. And if you would like for your outlook in the future to include a new home, you should probably call the Gusty Goulas and the Gusty Goulas Group. You can do so easily at 205-542-1996. If you can't call, just Google Gusty Goulas Group, brokered by eXp Realty, serve more than 3,000 home buyers and sellers in the greater Birmingham area, and see over 840 five-star Google reviews. Most agents start to market after you list with him, not Gusty Goulas. He's been doing that long before. He knows the market, knows the real estate, knows what's coming available, and wants to get you top dollar for your home. By the way, go to GustyGoulasGroup.com. There's a button at the top of the page. You can smash that button. Very little information. Find out what your home is worth today. So Google Gusty Goulas Group. See for yourself what they have done for so many here in Central Alabama, and from a real estate perspective, what they can do for you. Or go to GustyGoulasGroup.com or call 205-542-1996 today and start packing. We'll talk to Andy Burcham on the other side, take a look at what Auburn did over the weekend, what lies ahead for the Auburn Tigers. Still number one in yesterday's AP poll. Do you have a chance to peek at the AP poll in college basketball, by the way?
I look at it every Monday. I get an alert.
Alert. Was that, did you see like your alarm goes off or?
Yeah, seriously. Like it literally pops up on it's a notification on my phone.
But it is very different than it has been in quite some time. I'll explain that to you and why it is significant after we visit with Andy Burcham and ask him about Auburn's matchup with Ole Miss tomorrow night. Ask him about just the SEC field in general as we head into the SEC tournament. We've talked about how things may look a little bit different this year because of the situations that teams are in. What are Andy's thoughts on that? And then obviously just closing out this entire regular season with some history in front of this Auburn basketball team right now that is still number one in the nation and still has a lot in front of them. But how does Andy Burcham feel like that's going to play out? And then we'll talk a little college basketball after him. That'll include a conversation about some history in this current AP poll as to where it is. Was there anything that stuck out to you when you looked at it, just in general?
Nothing outrageous. Become so accustomed to seeing so many SEC teams at the top. And I do feel like nothing's changed too significantly. I also feel like the AP is a little bit more forgiving.
Well, there's one thing that's changed significantly.
What's that?
We'll get to it a little bit later. The AP poll did go Auburn 1, Duke 2, Florida 3, Houston 4, Tennessee 5, Alabama 6, St. John's 7, Michigan State 8, Iowa State 9, Texas Tech 10. Nice win last night for Texas Tech. Then you would go to Wisconsin. A&M comes in at 12. Missouri comes in at 14. Kentucky at 17. Mississippi State at 24. They're at Coleman Coliseum tonight, taking on the Alabama Crimson Tide, 8 o'clock on ESPN2. You can catch that one. We'll talk Auburn basketball with Andy Burcham next on Jocks 94.5. Hour number 2 underway, 8 a.m., Tuesday, February 25th. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning on Jocks 94.5, JocksFM.com. You can also download the app, listen there, watch there. There's a link to go watch it and catch up on all the podcasts. You can watch live on YouTube every morning. Just search Jocks 945. The voice of the Auburn Tigers joins us at this time every Tuesday. It's Andy Burcham, thanks to our friends at Craneworks.
Lift it, load it, grade it, grind it, move it, haul it, rig it, dig it, Craneworks, Rentalworks, yeah! The big dog's got it.
The voice of the Auburn Tigers, Andy Burcham, on Mac and Cube in the morning is brought to you by Craneworks. Lifted, buy and rented, the big dog's got it. Now, Andy Burcham.
Andy, always great to have you with us on a Tuesday. I tell you, I said it yesterday on the show. I didn't know whether to leave that game against Georgia somewhat concerned about a couple of the stretches and where Auburn appeared to let them hang in that game, or to walk away really excited that it continues to prove itself that this basketball team can win games in different styles. How did you walk away from that win against the Bulldogs?
I understand what you're saying, Cole, and I think we would all like for this Auburn team to go in and win every game by 15 or more points when it's favored by that much. But the fact is, Auburn leads the Southeastern Conference at 13-1 in a year where the Southeastern Conference has never been better in basketball. And I think that's the one thing that I have to continue to remind myself. I mean, this league is the best in the country. It's the best it's ever been, and I think it's one of the best we've ever seen in college basketball. And that's why Georgia, a team that is still trying to make its way into the NCAA tournament, can come into Auburn and play Auburn to within 12 of Auburn. So that's the point that I want to make, is that this league has never been better, and it's one of the best leagues we've ever seen to this point in college basketball. When the Joe Lunardis of the world is talking about 12 or 13 teams from this league making the NCAA tournament, I don't think we should be terribly surprised when a Georgia comes in and plays Auburn to within 12 of that game. So that's the point that I have to continue to remind myself of at this point of this season.
At what point do you feel like we're nitpicking how good they are? Because I feel like naturally, through the lens of an analyst or from the lens of a former player, you have a tendency to kind of, all right, how do they get us? Like, coaches aren't looking at like, oh, we're great here, we're great here. Coaches, I think, are programmed to say, all right, how do we get got? How does Auburn get got in your estimation at this point? Because it feels like they are pretty impenetrable at the moment.
That's a really good question. And you know what, though? I think the coaches are nitpicking right now. You hear Bruce Pearl talk about on our postgame show and with the media in general, that this team has to continue to get better at this point. So I think nitpicking is what the coaches are doing at this time. I look at this ball club right now, and I would love to see Auburn be more consistent offensively than it is. It still goes through periods where it's not, 2, 3, 4 minutes without scoring. But again, I just keep going back to the fact that Auburn's playing in the best league in the country right now. I think it's almost, I don't think it's realistic for me to think about this team going in and just blowing everybody away just because it's the best team in the best conference. I think injuries can play a factor for Auburn. And we've already seen that happen with Janai Broome being down 2 ball games. And Auburn won those 2 games, and one of those was against Mississippi State at Auburn, and Auburn won that game by 22. That should have been a much bigger surprise than Auburn going to Georgia and winning, and Georgia having a chance to tie it with 0.3 seconds to go in the game there. A cold shooting night or cold shooting day can affect Auburn. A game where Auburn gets into extraordinary foul trouble. Saturday was pretty close to that, with the 4 fouls early to Chad Baker-Mazara and Denver Jones. That can hurt Auburn. Beyond that, I think this team can beat you so many different ways. And listen, Saturday it was Janai Broome. 31 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks. That was an extraordinary performance in an extraordinary year by an extraordinary player in Janai Broom. So part of me says, listen, there have been some games this year that in years past Auburn wouldn't win, but they have found ways to win it this year, and I think that's why this is the best team in the country right now.
I think that might be a better way of stating it, Andy, than I did a little bit earlier, that we have seen really good teams under Bruce not find a way to win some of these games that have been competitive or close, whatever it is, that now they are finding those ways. And it feels like leadership, veteran presence has been a major reason for that. Some of those even additions through the portal. But part of that leadership is Janai Broom, and obviously so much going through him and him being such a big part of the team emotionally and with his play. Andy, he looked different Saturday. And when we talked to you last week, we kind of brought up, all right, this might be the last chance to sort of rest him before the postseason or just give him a few extra days off to get the ankle as right as possible. He looked like a different guy. And I do feel as though Georgia brought a little bit of that out. I feel like they agitated him to the point that he played a little bit more angry than I think I see him play on a very consistent basis. And maybe that was part of it. Interested to see what you saw from court level as to just physically how he appeared and then maybe what got him to that point in that game.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cole. And to that game last Saturday, really hadn't seen that pep in his step, so to speak. But we saw it on Saturday. He was moving better than we've seen in the last couple of weeks. And he has, and this medical staff and the strength and conditioning folks, Damon Davis and Clark Pearson, who's Auburn's athletic trainer, and the nutritionist, all of that, I mean, and Janai, most importantly, have really been working hard since that ankle injury at South Carolina last month. And I'm not saying it hasn't paid off because he only missed 2 games. And he's played on a bad ankle since then. He looked more healthy with that ankle on Saturday. He was moving better on Saturday. Now, whether he felt agitated by the way Georgia was playing or the game itself or whatever, I don't know that. I just felt physically he looked more like the Janai that we saw until that ankle injury in South Carolina. And I hope we continue to see that for his sake, certainly for Auburn's sake, as it moves forward. With 4 games left in the regular season, Ole Miss tomorrow night at Neville Arena, on the road in back-to-back games at Kentucky on Saturday, and then Texas A&M next Tuesday, and then, of course, the finale a week from Saturday at home against Alabama.
Do you at any point feel like that's something that they would have let him play on had it been something that could be agitated further? Because I've kind of gotten the sense now with him having just looked better and better and better, it was clearly something that they felt really in control of, and they knew that him playing wouldn't make it worse. So had to have felt pretty good, I would think, about kind of where things are at and how he was progressing with that ankle injury and the shoulder injury.
I think from the start, and in both of those injuries, the shoulder and the ankle, they felt that by him coming back and playing, he wasn't going to hurt it further. I think they got that indication pretty early. So the 2 games that he missed, I think Janai desperately wanted to be out there and playing, but I think everyone knew that he needed time to rehab and to rest that ankle. And then it became time for him to come back and play. But no, I don't believe there was ever a time that Auburn was worried that he was going to further hurt or injure that ankle by coming back and playing. And Bruce Pearl has talked about that really since the time that Janai Broom came back. And Janai Broom has made a difference. I mean, I think the first game that he came back, if I'm not mistaken, was that Tennessee game, which was number 1 against number 6, and game day was here, and all of the hype that goes into that ball game. And if Janai Broom isn't out there, Auburn doesn't win that game. Auburn doesn't win that game at Alabama if Janai Broom isn't out there playing. There's been a lot of those games where we'd say, yeah, Janai isn't out there, Auburn's not winning. But I don't think Auburn ever put Janai in any kind of danger of further injuring that ankle. I think they knew from the beginning that when he came back, he wasn't going to further injure that ankle at this point. So He would look like a different play. He looked like the Janai Broom that we saw until that ankle injury on Saturday, and I certainly hope we continue to see that.
Andy Bertram, voice of the Auburn Tigers, joining us on the Buyers Right Hotline. When you look ahead at this SEC tournament, and I want your thoughts on this from a conference perspective, there are a few teams that are in really good spots. Auburn's in a great spot. Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama are in really good spots. Probably not going to see themselves any further down than the 2 line in this NCAA tournament. Not a ton of heavy lifting to be done by those teams at the top in this SEC tournament. What are your expectations for it? How it might go, how it might look? None of us think that a team is intentionally going to mail it in, but because some teams towards the bottom of the league, the middle of the league, need it a little bit more, and the great standing that a couple of teams at the top are in, do you expect it to be maybe a little less chalky as far as this thing moves ahead?
It wasn't chalky last year at all. I mean, the teams and Auburn was a 2 seed, remember, going into the tournament last year, but Tennessee lost early. Alabama lost early. Kentucky lost early. So Auburn's 3 teams that had played in the SEC tournament last year were Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't some big upsets in the tournament this year. One, you've added 2 more teams to the league, so there's more of an opportunity for upsets out there, with Oklahoma and Texas being in Nashville in early March. And with a conference the way this is, and with teams going into the SEC tournament with their NCAA tournaments on the line, yeah, I wouldn't at all be surprised if we don't see some major upsets at the SEC tournament. Right now, Auburn's number one focus is Ole Miss here. I think 2 on the list is winning an SEC regular season championship. And then you get to the postseason. And Auburn won the SEC tournament a year ago and then lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament to Yale. I think a year ago winning that SEC tournament took a lot out of Auburn. And then Auburn gets shipped all the way west in a game where it's kind of a perfect storm. Yale comes out and shoots the ball incredibly well, and Chad Baker-Mazar is kicked out of the game for a flagrant 2 foul. And a lot of things happen, and Auburn is shocked that it loses in the first game of the NCAA tournament. I think there's a lot of those factors that goes into Auburn for the rest of the season. That Yale game has been something that has been pounded into this team by Bruce Pearl since the end of last season. And I think it will become even more of a focus as we get closer and closer to the postseason. The SEC tournament will be very, very important for Auburn. But I think it will be just as hard, or maybe even harder, for Auburn to win that tournament this year than it was a year ago, because I think the league is that much better this year than it was a year ago.
Absolutely. Andy, great stuff. Always appreciate the time. And obviously every week you're brought to us by Craneworks.
And Wasteworks is a Craneworks company. It provides roll-off dumpster retail, or rentals, that is, in the Birmingham area. They have a wide range of sizes and fast service, and they're your source for local dumpster rentals. Visit wasteworksusa.com for a quote. We're on the air tomorrow night at 6:30 on the Auburn Sports Network. Excuse me, at 5:30. I apologize. 5:30 tomorrow night. Auburn and Ole Miss at 6 from Neville Arena.
There you go. Thanks, Andy.
My pleasure, guys. War Eagle.
War Eagle. And you can hear that game right here on Jocks 94.5. That is Ole Miss at Auburn. Pre-game coverage starts at 5:30. Andy will be on the call for that game as a top 25 team comes into Neville Arena. We'll continue talking a little bit of college basketball and what I mentioned to Greg about that top 25. What is so different about it currently? We'll discuss it next on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Tuesday, February 25th, 8:17 a.m. right here on Jocks 94.5. Watch live on YouTube. Search Jocks 945. Subscribe to the channel as well. Listen online, jocksfm.com. Appreciate those listening up north on Sports Radio 730, Talk Radio, 730 and 103.9 FM, The Ump. Some scores before we get into this top 25 in basketball quickly from yesterday, last night. Alabama State goes down to Bethune, 70-68. Both those teams now 13 and 15. Florida A&M goes down to Alabama A&M, 66-77. Alabama A&M now double-digit wins on the season. However, Sterling Young for Florida A&M, 31 points off the bench last night for the Rattlers. Alabama A&M shot 9 of 20 from three, out-rebounded Florida A&M 34-28. And UNA gets to 21-9 on the season, 93-70 at Central Arkansas. They get the win last night. They shot 12 of 25 from behind the three-point line, so a nice win there for the Lions as they get to 21 wins on the season. I asked you what stood out a little bit with the current AP poll and why it might look a little bit different. Before we get to that, one thing that we know is always different is the inventory at Bromberg's.
Bromberg's is amazing. I've been going there since we moved back, and I have yet to buy anything, frankly, from anywhere other than Bromberg's. I just have such a great experience. When I walk in, I feel like I'm talking with friends. I feel like I'm talking with family. They know my preferences. They know my wife's preferences. They know my budget more often than not before I walk in. And I know that anytime I go in and I buy something at Bromberg's, I'm getting something timeless, something that could potentially be passed down to my daughter, potentially that could be passed down to one of my two sons. I know that it's purchasing quality with an elevated experience that you won't find anywhere else. Go and see the incredible people at Bromberg's. Get yourself a natural diamond, get yourself a watch, get yourself a timepiece, get yourself a gift for someone that you care very much about, whether it's a wedding coming up or something along the lines of that. You'll just be so happy with the experience that you have when you go and see Bromberg's in Mountain Brook Village and at the Summit.
I will say this. I went to Bromberg's for the Valentine's Day deal, bought the vase for my wife.
Also known as a vase.
Vase. What was, I forget the brand name.
Vietri.
The Vietri.
Yes.
And got a smaller one for my daughter, and she got the engraved pendant.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this. We usually don't do anything for Valentine's Day for my wife and I don't for each other. It was a big hit.
What's right?
Both. The daughter thought the pendant engraved for her was really special, really cool. And my wife loved the vase. And that's rare for me to be able to pick out something along those lines in that demographic of gifts and be successful with it.
Love that.
So, yeah, it was a big win. Thanks to Bromberg's.
Well, when you have people that can help you out like Bromberg's does, that makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, it helped that Frank met me down there. So that was obviously a big assistance there. All right, so I asked you what was different about this AP Top 25, what appears to be different. And you said not any massive shakeups, which was accurate. However, there was one team that dropped out of the AP poll this week.
Ooh.
A familiar team.
Bye, Kansas.
They're out.
See ya.
Kansas no longer in the AP Top 25, the first time that's happened since February 8th of 2021. Now, that might not sound like that long ago, but it did end a streak of 80 weeks inside the poll, which was the second longest active streak behind
Duke.
Incorrect. Anyone?
Kentucky.
Hawaii.
Wow. Did not know that the Rainbow Warriors were ranked this week, but that would be Houston at 102 weeks.
H-Town.
Houston up to 4th this week. And the other part about this that is a little bit strange, you'd have to go back and pull up a preseason AP Top 25 for basketball this year.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the ability to do that, I'll just help you a little bit.
Please.
Inside the top 10 of that would have been Kansas, UConn, Gonzaga, North Carolina, and Baylor.
The Zaga.
Why would I bring up those teams that were in the preseason top 10 of the AP poll? Because those teams are no longer ranked.
Oh.
Half of the preseason top 10 is out of the top 25. This is the fourth time in 55 seasons that half of the preseason AP top 10 have been unranked in a certain time through the AP poll's history.
That is not good. That is bad. That's real bad.
How about this one? The last 8 NCAA tournament champions, Greg,
8?
Unranked.
No.
Your answer earlier would have been correct with the last champion that is currently ranked would be the Duke Blue Devils from 2015.
No.
So
Are you sad about this?
not sad at all.
It's got to make you a little sad.
I think that college basketball feels like it's in a really healthy place. Maybe that's because of how good the SEC is this year, that we are paying more attention to it. We're watching it. It's more interesting. We're getting more interesting games on a weekly basis, not just with the teams that we personally follow, but with teams that are going to be on the schedule on a regular basis. However, I also think this furthers the discussion about sort of where college sports is right now. And that you are a little more capable of not only gaining something and being that much better, but potentially losing something or not adding to what you have and things being very different. I go back to Jim Larinaga when he retired earlier this year about how frustrated he was that had guys that were on a team to make a deep tournament run and all of a sudden don't want to be there anymore, which that's where we are in today's
You don't say.
college sports. But overall, is this good or bad for the health of college basketball?
Probably good, right?
I think so.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, it's going to make your Duke fans mad. It's going to make your North Carolina fans mad. It's going to make your UConn fans mad. I mean, hell, you just won back-to-back championships. I don't know how you could really be super upset about it. But
I mean, I don't think you need to necessarily be happy about it, but I also don't think you necessarily need to be mad about it either. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with some new blood. I don't think there's anything that you can be mad about with having some new faces, some new teams, some new opportunities for those teams to kind of showcase what they got. I mean, I've been such a huge fan of seeing the shakeup in college basketball because we just don't get it in football. We don't. I mean, it's kind of plug and play. You kind of know what you're going to get. You have a pretty good judgment as to how things might go. So it's nice to have a sport that really, truly, genuinely is unpredictable. College basketball is remarkably unpredictable, and that to me is healthy. College football is everything but. So it's kind of nice to know that once a year, we're going to have some chaos and we're not going to have all the answers going into the season. And that's kind of fun.
Well, and it's one of the things that we did talk about with college football, how kind of heading into this next season, there's so many unknowns, and we look at teams, we try to find a national champion or a playoff contender or who can make a deep run, and it feels more difficult than ever to find those teams. That probably a big reason that you're seeing some of the teams that were at the top,
right?
Most of which that I mentioned, traditional powers. I mean, it's easy to take Kansas, UConn, Gonzaga, UNC, Baylor, and put them at the top of your AP poll in the preseason. But some of the uncertainty, some of the unknowns, it's not just going to be in college football. It's going to be in all the sports that have roster turnover, roster change. And there's a lot of, that's why we're seeing what we're seeing with spring football. There are a lot of players that are waiting in the wings that coaches know are going to be good.
Yeah.
Or have a really good feeling are going to be able to help their team.
Pretty good feeling.
And some of these other teams might not know it to that coach's extent, but when they lose them, they find out pretty quickly. Oh, well, guess what? You don't have to wait to play here. We need you now.
Yes, today.
And then you get that benefit. You say, hell with the question marks. We got to get this guy in the lineup because he's our better option. And then next thing you know, he helps your team. Basketball, right. Baseball, football, whatever it is. So it is a part of the landscape now, but it's just intriguing to see some of those traditional powers that we would never expect a top 25 in basketball without Kansas, UConn, and North Carolina. The last 10 years without Kansas, UConn, Gonzaga, North Carolina, and Baylor. Like that doesn't feel real. But there are a lot of positives, I believe, with that being where we are.
Sure.
Specifically here in the SEC country because the SEC is dominating the current top 25.
It definitely works out well for this part of the country. My question is, because we've always had this conversation, like having a Kansas, having a Kentucky, like having a blue blood in there, one that has some gravitational pull, the one that has some national appeal is really valuable. I mean, let's be real. When you have let's use college football again as an example. If you took Cincinnati, TCU, and, Georgia Tech and Oregon, Is that going to move the needle very much in the Final Four? Probably not. You kind of need that North Carolina. You kind of need that Duke. And as much as I love what we have in the SEC outside of Kentucky, there isn't that team that has national appeal for basketball fans, casual fans that are going to just tune in, that maybe don't have a bet ticket on the game, but have an interest in what the game might look like. So I am curious. I think having those blue bloods of basketball is of the utmost importance. But I also think that when you have blue bloods in general, that can be valuable. I mean, regardless of how you slice it, maybe not in basketball, but Bama's a blue blood program organizationally. No matter how you slice it, there's plenty of others. Duke is in basketball, obviously, but others that are up there at or near the top, like Tennessee, kind of a blue blood program, basketball, football, all of them together. Even though they've never been to a Final Four, still blue blood when you combine it all. A blue blood brand, if you will.
Yeah.
So do we have enough blue blood brands? You think people will be tuned in? If the Final Four is some contingency of Auburn, Duke, Florida, and Houston, just using the top 4 teams, you think that's going to be enough to move the needle for the casual fans? I think it is.
Let's go any 4 of the top 8, and we'll split it in half there, that 4 of those top 8 make it: Auburn, Duke, Florida, Houston, Tennessee, Alabama, St. John's, and Michigan State. I would say yes.
I would agree.
Because I think that there's enough prowess there from some of the common knowns. And then I think you're going to have some incredible stories. I mean, maybe you have Bruce chasing his first national championship. You have Pitino and St. John's and what they would be potentially doing there. Houston has had multiple runs of greatness over time in college basketball, and obviously brings a massive media market with it, which I think would be a positive. I think we know Nate Oates getting to Alabama's first Final Four and then potentially chasing his first national championship would be a great story. We know where Rick Barnes has been at Tennessee, and Tennessee has been a team that has been in that spot a couple of times. Izzo would be an amazing story for all the reasons that we already know. I don't need to explain them. And Michigan State is that brand in college basketball. Now, are those Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, Kansas? No. But
do you need Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas?
It's a really good question.
I really don't know.
I kind of don't think so, because I think that this tournament is one of those standalone products that just lives on its own and doesn't necessarily need the name value.
Yeah.
Was it last year or 2 years ago that the Elite Eight was really down on name value, and people were wondering how it was going to rate, what it was going to be? I think people are still going to watch it. I think because of brackets, gambling, and just overall interest in this entity itself, that the viewership is never going to deplete too much, regardless of name recognition, brand recognition, historical references that you're going to be able to make on teams that are in it.
Yeah. I'm watching no matter what, so I could really care less. That's my own personal opinion. Now, everyone views it differently. I think people view health in a different, everyone interprets health differently. I don't care. I'm watching. I'm a diehard sports fan.
I think this is one of the entities, though, Greg, that the Cinderella, the underdog, the unknown, it almost raises the ante more the further they go.
Yeah.
You get the Masters and, an amateur is in the top 5 on Sunday. It gets a few people into it, but it's not going to move the masses towards that. I think the masses begin to move towards Butler. The masses begin to move towards George Mason. They want to see how these stories are going to end. And they want to follow that maybe more consistently than they would the underdog story in some other entities, tournaments, championship games, championship settings, whatever that is. How many people are dialed into Coastal Carolina making a College World Series run? I don't know. I don't think it moves. I think
baseball is so niche.
Yeah, but it doesn't move the meter as much as it would here. How many people were into Arizona State and Boise and what they did in the first round of the playoff last year, just being able to be there, get there, second round, I guess.
Well, don't you feel like baseball is a little too niche? I mean, don't get me wrong.
But I still believe that LSU moves the meter. I think there are certain, Texas is going to move the meter. There are college baseball powers traditionally that are still going to be teams that people look at and say, okay, I want to go watch them.
Yeah.
Because they're back. But that's, I think there are fewer of those in baseball. And I think there are more new fans to college baseball maybe than any other sport. But
I would agree
I think
with that.
I think this can kind of stand on its own legs. And you can create the stories around it, even if it's not Kentucky and Duke and North Carolina and Kansas.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. I'm perfectly fine. I have no problem whatsoever with what we're looking at right now in college sports. Like, I like new blood, but I like new blood in football too. And I am different there. Like,
But you got it this year.
I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Notre Dame play for the national championship. Not a lot of people do.
Notre Dame is new blood?
In the national championship game, winning multiple playoff games. Like, yeah, they hadn't won a BCS game since '95.
They're the oldest of old blood, though. Like
But they hadn't done anything of significance in my lifetime. They really hadn't. Now, maybe in your lifetime, because you were born in '67.
Yeah, I've seen so many Notre Dame national championships.
Just because you played against Lou Holtz in '88 and you saw him win the Natty that year doesn't mean you need to be mad at me. I think that it was kind of fun to have some new blood. Like, it was cool to me to see what SMU could potentially do. It was neat to see Penn State have a nice year and break through a little bit. Like, I'm all for having some new bodies in the conversation. Now, do I want that every year? No. Do I like having Ohio State opposite the new blood? Yes, 100%. So I think basketball, with the parity that we've experienced forever, is amazing. I love it. Absolutely love it. But I also acknowledge that it will be better served as a sport if we have some traditional powers in there along with some of the new bloods as well. So in a perfect world, put Duke in the Final Four, and then hopefully Auburn, Alabama, you got a story and connection with those two, and then whoever you want to fill out as the fourth, I'm good with. That, to me, is your ideal Final Four from my vantage point as a fan of the sport.
I think a lot of people feel in a very similar way. And you just look at like San Diego State, how many more fans showed up and wanted to be a part of that run and got more interested in this tournament. I think all those things come into play. It feels like it's easier to get on board faster with teams that surprise in this tournament, maybe than in any other full season of sports that we talk about. I think just because so many people maybe find out so much later, either in football or baseball or softball or different sports like that, I mean, this is a tournament that people fall in love with the team in a week, a couple of days. I mean, look at Sister Jean.
Whoa.
Who's still discussed, by the way. But I mean, it took 1 week, like 2 wins for that team, 1 weekend, and all of a sudden half of America falls in love with that team and they want to watch them and want to see what they're capable of and want to see what they're going to do.
Who didn't love Loyola Chicago?
Everyone did. Every single person. Except for the teams that they were playing.
Would you consider yourself a Loyola Chicago fan?
Probably not. I hadn't seen the tape recently, so I wouldn't go that far. Just to say that I have followed up checking the statistics on that group, but there are a lot of people who wanted to watch them when they were on, even if the only thing that they knew was Sister Jean. That was it. But still, you look at kind of what it was and what folks were doing, you could consider that to be a positive. All right, when we come back, we'll go over to a little bit more football. The Combine has a participant raise his hand, step up, saying that he is going to compete, and another raise their hand to say they will not be competing this week. And who's going to win? Who's going to walk away as the winner at each position? We'll discuss all of those next right here on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. Welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, 800-239-9569. You want to talk NFL Combine, players you're interested to see, players you're interested to watch. Coming up this week in Indianapolis that will be competing. Some will not be competing. We mentioned yesterday Shedeur Sanders saying he's not going to throw. Greg told us he doesn't think that affects his draft stock very much because most of what is out there is out there. You know what you're going to get. And maybe the more important portions of it come behind the scenes when you'll be sitting down with head coaches, GMs, scouts, members of the front office that are going to be making those decisions either way. Ashton Jeanty, Greg, has said that he will not work out at the Combine. And we actually saw a draft projection when we came into the office today at 6 overall for Jeanty, which would be wow-worthy just because of the position more so than anything.
When was the last time we saw a running back go that high? We saw one go a few years. I know Saquon, obviously, that's the obvious one. But I feel like there was one that went in the top 4 a couple of years.
Zeke?
No, Zeke was in 2016.
Oh, Bijan. Yeah.
Bijan went 7 to Atlanta. I think that's the only one that I can think of recently, though, that's gone that high.
There haven't been many that have been off the board that high. Your highest last year was Jonathan Brooks at 14th in the second round, 46th overall. Bijan was your last running back in the first. 2023, he and Jahmyr Gibbs came off at 8 and 12 overall. After that, back to the first round, you got to go back to Najee Harris in 2021, who went 24th overall. ATN just behind him at 25th overall. Then you go to 2020, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the last pick of the first round to the Chiefs. Josh Jacobs in 19 came off 24th overall. And then you mentioned it, Saquon at 2 overall in 2018.
So 6 would be the highest in a while.
It'd be the highest in quite some time.
Yeah.
Now, the year before that, 2017, Leonard Fournette at 4, Christian McCaffrey at 8. Whoops. Jags, Panthers. But yeah, it just the first rounders don't happen often. John wasn't off far because Zeke Elliott was 4th overall in 2016. We don't see this much. Is an Ashton Jeanty 6 overall value pick worthwhile? Specifically, if it was going to the Raiders?
Oof. No. I mean, if I were the Raiders, I'm not taking a running back at 6.
Is he going to change your team that much?
I don't think so.
Also, Greg, I think, too, specifically.
Good player.
He's a
phenomenal
great player.
Love the guy.
And I think he can be a difference maker in the NFL. It's just, is he a difference maker to that tune? What I would be hoping for if I was the Raiders was there was another team that thought Ashton Jeanty was worth the number 6 pick and wanted to move there to get him. Because I think what the Raiders need is multiple selections. I'm probably going to say that for any team, though, that's not in a great playoff position.
About to say, I feel like the Raiders are among about 15 teams that need multiple selections this year.
But I would also say the main reason to me that sounds like it might be a bit of a stretch is I think that tier 2 of this running back class is really good.
Yeah.
Jeanty, Amarian Hampton, Quinshon, maybe Caleb Johnson, even if you wanted to throw them in tier 1. When you're looking at Dylan Sampson, Jordan James, Damian Martinez, Travion, Scattaboo, Ollie Gordon, Devin Neal, Donovan Edwards, Jarquez Hunter. I think there's going to be so much value in, Taj Brooks, Nate Noel, probably not as durable as you're going to need, but offers you some different things.
Yeah.
I think the early to late 3rd, maybe early 4th, you're still going to get real value at that position.
Don't disagree. Draft. Don't disagree at all. I just think Jeanty's a difference maker.
Is there a newfound premium that's been put on running back because of what just transpired with Saquon Barkley in the playoffs? No, because he's not Saquon.
But we don't know that.
I know that I'm not going to put him on that level.
I don't know.
I don't think the burst is the same. I don't think the quickness, the twitch is the same.
I think
disagree. He's a little bit more of a grinder, but that has also been successful in the NFL at times. If I think number one, you got to be dedicated to it. What did the Eagles drafted heavily the 2 and 3 years before he came to the roster?
Offensive line.
There you go. They have put equity in the tight end position And then adding a mobile quarterback, I think, also helps Saquon.
Is it safe to say, though, that Saquon has always had a better situation than what Genty's had in his evaluation process?
If you're asking me if the Penn State offensive line in college was better than Ashton Genty's, then yes.
Okay. So do we know? I mean, Genty, you say the burst. Like, I think the burst is what Genty's best attribute is, that he can get 0 to 60
all I said
in
was
a
that
hurry.
It wasn't Saquon's burst.
Well, I don't
Laterally
necessarily,
and getting to full speed.
I don't
think it's the
necessarily
same.
disagree with that. I'm trying to play devil's advocate for a minute here. Like, I would take Saquon over Ashton Genty. He's bigger, he's more physical, and I think he's got another gear that Genty can't get to. And I also think he's a really good pass catcher out of the backfield. So I think there's a lot to like. But I'm telling you, man, I love Genty. But I just don't know. I got to know that my coach knows how to use him.
Yes.
Like, I got to know for certain.
And that my franchise is dedicated to using him in the right way.
Correct. And I'm going to make him a very featured part of what we do. It's a hugely important part of who I want my offense to be, is a matchup-oriented offense. And if I want a matchup-oriented offense, I can live with Ashton Genty at number 6. You already got Brock Bowers, who's a serious problem. I can go get Ashton Genty, and then I can go get my quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round. I don't hate the situation there, but yeah, I got to know for sure that Genty is as good a pass catcher as I think he might be.
Yeah,
that is not a foregone conclusion.
No, I don't, and then I just think also, and again, this is not to put him down, but if you're making this, and we're not making a Saquon comp really, but that's Saquon ball out in space feels a little bit different than Ashton Genty does. If you're going to use him,
Saquon scares me a lot more than Ashton Genty.
Ooh, a lot more, but it's again in a different way. It's not that he's not capable. And you go look at some of the receiving numbers, as viable as it would be at some other spots.
I'm not sure you're going to get the answer to that at this moment.
Just get down if you can. If you're the Raiders, get down, get another pick, and help your team in multiple spots.
I just feel like the draft is deep and not wide. It's just, there's not really.
I think there are certain positions in this draft that after what we would look at as the first player or two off the board, it gets really, I think the depth is good for multiple positions. Like I think if you look at offensive line, I kind of feel that way.
Yeah.
At both spots, both guard and tackle, that there's not a clear, okay, this guy is this much different than everybody else.
Sure.
And even if you wanted to say Josh Simmons, Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell are different, then I still think you have.
Is he though?
No, I don't believe any of those
Okay.
are, to be honest with you. Some in certain areas, like, do I think Kelvin Banks is more athletic than any of that I mentioned? Yes, that doesn't make you a great tackle. Do I think Will Campbell has the intangibles that I want more so than any of those guys? Yes, I do. Doesn't make you a great tackle. But I think after you get past whoever you would put as the first and second off the board, you've got Emory Jones, you've got Mimbu, you've got Cam Williams, guys who I think have great ability and you can probably work with.
Sure.
But they're all sort of grouped together. I do think Mimbu was separated at right tackle than anybody else in this draft.
Yeah, but right tackle, like what kind of premium are you putting on a franchise right tackle? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we've seen plenty of guys go. Who's the guy from Bama a couple years back that went to Cleveland that's a primary right tackle?
Jedrick Wills,
yeah. So, I mean, it happens, but I'm not spending I don't know if I'm going to spend the lot on a right tackle.
It's fair.
I hate saying it, but it's the truth.
So who will be sort of I don't want to say unknowns, but maybe the unexpected winners at each position in this year's draft? We'll discuss that next on Mac and Cube in the morning. Tuesday, February 25th, 8:53 a.m. right here on Jocks 94.5. We're talking NFL Combine. We discussed quarterbacks yesterday and who we thought would kind of come away as the winner of the Combine at the quarterback position. You went with Jalen Milroe, which I think I would have to agree with just based on physically what he's capable of doing. It's almost a setting that's just made for him, Greg.
Yeah, it's a perfect situation for him to go and perform. I mean, he's very, very gifted athletic. Now, it would be surprising. I saw in some draft notes the last time we looked this up. I was a little surprised when looking at some of the numbers. Like, he's projected to run a 4.6 in the 40. Are you buying that?
No.
Like, no way, right? I was really surprised by that, but be curious to see how it goes.
He's been clocked over 22 miles an hour.
Yeah, I'd be surprised.
And Saban told us the year before he became the starter, he was the fastest player on the team. If you were telling me that Saban going into his second to last year that the fastest player on his team ran a 4.6, no. Just no.
That's what it said. I don't shoot the messenger.
Okay,
I was like,
cool.
I find that very hard to believe.
I'll take the under if anyone would like action on that.
I'm not sure there's a whole lot of folks that would be willing to bet on that. I know I wouldn't, but I'll be curious to see what he runs. I also will be real curious to see, is there any type of adjustment that's been made to how he holds the ball or how he does all these other things? Like, I think that's something that's very interesting. Like, his hand size was something I never really thought about, but apparently is a big problem to NFL scouts, which would indicate why the ball security was occasionally an issue and why there was from time to time some inconsistency with ball security. So I'll be curious to see how that goes. So there's a handful of things I'm very curious about with his evaluation.
Is there a running back in this class that you look at this week specifically that you think not getting buzz right now, that is a winner coming out of the Combine, and all of a sudden a lot more people are talking about him?
A running back right now.
God, this class is so deep.
The running back group's good.
Guys that aren't even going to be talked about. Montreal Johnson, Rocket Sanders, RJ Harvey at UCF. Corey Kiner at Cincinnati had a great year and
good
showed
player.
some signs when he was at LSU of being a great. Ulysses Bentley is going to be super explosive. Now, people are going to wonder why he wasn't getting carries for a large portion of the season. Woody Marks, if Woody Marks gets into a zone scheme in the NFL, he can be a great back in the NFL. It's just like Devin Neal is not going to be talked about. This is just this is one of the deeper running back classes I can ever remember.
It's a really good group, and it shouldn't be that surprising. It's a group that, running backs, because there's so many guys that still have a lot of tread on the tires. Think about how many guys have gotten limited touches in their career. So it's like they go into it, you're like feeling, hey man, if this guy ever became a lion's share carry guy, then you could be cooking with gas. So I really like the upside of a lot of these guys. And frankly, the fact that most of which have not had to carry a heavy burden in their careers.
Absolutely. All right, we'll continue talking Combine. We'll move to, is there a guy that sticks out though? Taj Brooks, DJ Giddens.
I'd be really curious to see how Jarquez runs. Because I think Jarquez is going to be like a 4.65 guy. Like, I don't think he's going to run well at all, but you can't get him to the ground.
I think he is one that has a chance to leave with people saying better things than we imagine. I think Montreal Johnson's another one. And
who wins in a race, him or Jarquez?
I think Jarquez. I'll take Jarquez there. Yeah. I think Jarquez is a little more explosive than people believe, but I think those are two of the names that people are talking a lot more about. More Combine after this. NFL Combine underway in Indianapolis. Workouts begin later this week. Going to run through some of the positions to see who we think may be bigger winners than are anticipated. Bigger winners than maybe folks are discussing right now coming out of certain position groups. 9 a.m., hour number 3 underway, Jocks 94.5, Tuesday, February 25th. Listen online, jocksfm.com. There are multiple positions yet for us to get to, and we will continue discussing those here in just a moment. First, some cool weather still hanging around. Schedule your system checkup now with a Trane Comfort Specialist. Trane's been recognized 10 consecutive years as America's most trusted HVAC brand and our exclusive home comfort partners here at Jocks. Visit Trane.com to find a comfort specialist near you. Remember, it's hard to stop a Trane. So let's move to, do we have a definitive coming out of running back? I will say this. Is Dylan Sampson getting enough buzz going into the combine?
Probably not.
Or into this draft process? He feels like he could be a guy.
He's a really good player, man. I don't feel like he didn't get enough buzz last year. So why would he get buzz in the process of who's going to draft him when no one even talked about him at all last year? The guy should have been on everyone's Heisman short list, and no one even mentioned him.
Is he one of the few that could sort of wow people in the 40 here, you think?
Yeah.
I go back to what you were saying about, we talked about Genty, we talked about Montrell Johnson. You look like Rocket Sanders isn't going to rip up the 40. I don't think DJ Giddens is going to rip up the 40. Like Phil Moffa's not going to rip up the 40. But I look at maybe Ulysses Bentley. I look at probably, I think Woody Marks could maybe surprise some people. Jordan James can. Omarion Hampton potentially could. And then Dylan Sampson. Like those are the guys that I look at and say could really make a difference with what they put up in the 40.
Yeah.
Like Ollie Gordon, I don't feel like he's going to put up an amazing 40 time. Do you?
Probably not. He wouldn't be at the top of my list as far as guys that could make some moves on how their 40 time goes.
Yeah.
I think ATN's going to run well. I would be surprised if.
Like Scadaboo's not going to put up a big 40 time. Like people aren't going to say, "Oh wow, I feel totally different now because he put up a 4.41."
You think he's got 4.41 in there?
In the 30.
Love that. I'm trying to think of like who else would maybe be a
Caleb
burner.
Johnson's not going to be that guy. And maybe this is what hurts a couple of these backs is that they're going to be classified in a similar manner of running back.
Perhaps.
Rashard Smith, maybe?
Nah. I'm looking through the list right now of guys that can just flat out fly. I'll tell you a guy who's a good player is Devin Neal, Kansas. He's a
really
good player.
I mean, it goes on when you continue to look down this list of backs here. It's amazing that you get to the bottom and it's like Phil Moffa, Ulysses Bentley, Taj Brooks, Corey Kiner, Donovan Edwards, guys that have been great college players that I think have a chance to be good pros. Maybe not. They're not all going to turn out to be Edgerrin James, but I think could be really good pros and on rosters for a long time.
Is the gap between Omarion Hampton and Ashton Genty to like 20 spots too wide in my mind?
No. That's why I think Genty at 6 is too high. Because there are other guys that you can get, depending on what you want, what you need, you can get similar to, and I'm not saying that Quinshon Judkins is similar to Genty. But if you're just looking for a banger, and you're just looking for a guy like, hey, listen, our passing game is set. We have a good, not great offensive line. We just need you to pick up some dirty yards 8 to 12 times a game. You're telling me Quinshon can't do that in the NFL? I think he'd be great doing that for a team in the NFL. Same thing for Damian Martinez. Same thing for Caleb Johnson.
Yeah, but I think all those guys are going to be really good. Those are all going to be top.
Same thing for Ollie Gordon.
If you want to get a guy in the 7th round, go get Taj Brooks from Texas Tech or Rocket Sanders.
Right. But what you're saying is a guy who could change how we design our offense. Do I think Omarion Hampton is night and day to Ashton Genty of that? I do not. No. Now, do I think Omarion Hampton's, if we were coming up with our mythical PFF stats and his arm tackle break rate or whatever the hell they want to call it, is it going to be as high as Genty's? No, probably not.
Nah.
I mean, Genty's stepping on people, stiff arming people, like walking away from people that are basically, have him wrapped up.
Yeah.
Omarion's not doing that as often as he is. But explosive capability, Omarion Hampton I don't put him too far off of anybody on this list. If you're talking about turning the corner and going, he's not much different than anybody on this list.
No.
So it is, I think it's the most interesting position in this draft because you got a guy being talked about in the top 10. And then as you just stated, there are 2 or 3 others that are not that far off of him. If Travion Henderson is healthy, if you guaranteed health for him, How much different is he than Ashton Genty?
Not.
Now, health is a big part of it, right?
Of course.
I mean, you don't want to pay a guy first-round money and he comes in and plays 4 games.
Wouldn't want that.
And Trayvion's been dinged a bunch.
A lot. But it's always like soft tissue stuff. It's always like, oh, he's got a hamstring. Oh, he's got, it's like, it's
Quads.
irritating stuff,
No, you're right.
Like, I don't know if it's diet related. I'm not sure. All I know is the guys that have a lot of soft tissue stuff, they usually didn't eat very well. They didn't take.
It's been my problem for a long time.
Yes, which is why you are, a walking back spasm.
It's why all my tissue is soft.
Anytime I have an injury, it's a soft tissue related injury because all of my tissue is soft. I like that. That's well said. I think running back and wide receiver are the 2 most interesting positions in the draft this year. I look at other positions. I think tight end's pretty clear cut. There's a massive drop off after the top 2. I think at tackle, it's anybody's guess. I'd probably lean towards Will Campbell over the rest of them, but everyone seems to love Simmons from Ohio State and Connerly from Oregon. You can have them in my eyes. Guard, I'll take Booker every day of the week and twice on Saturday.
I think for me, guard is it might be the most clear-cut number 1 of
Whoa,
any
what about
position.
Donovan Jackson? No, he can slide out.
Congrats.
You know how important that is? Position versatility.
It almost cost the Eagles a playoff game.
Oh, my good. Don't you start.
Did they not have protection issues when they had to move guys around? And it's nothing against those individuals. It's just any offensive line when you move guys around is not going to be the same.
Look how versatile.
Listen,
Tyler Booker slid out to tackle too.
It's really cool for us to talk about, hey, this guy takes 3 roster spots. But it's also the National Football League. So when you move someone to where they are 10% less the player, you're still going against a guy who's 100% that player.
Yes.
And they're going to know how to make you look bad. If you are 10, 15% less adverse to being the best at that spot than the guy before you was, they're going to be able to make that look bad. It's just the reality of it. So It's nothing against Landon Dickerson or any of the guys that had to move around. It's just, it becomes a little bit different and guys can take advantage of that.
Yep.
So
same team.
I'll take Tyler Booker every single day of the week over Donovan Jackson.
Same page. I got no problem with that. D tackle's obvious to me. It's Mason Graham and everybody else playing for second. I don't hate the kid at Ohio State, Tyleik Williams.
Well, there are certain people that have Walter Nolan ahead of Mason Graham.
You can have him.
No naps of practice for you?
Not huge on it. I can get around it.
I'll take the guy that was solid day in, day out, night in, night out, than the guy who flashed every now and then.
Now, I think off the ball linebacker, there's a lot of potential names here. Like, I'll tell you this. I'll take Chris Paul from Ole Miss.
He can play.
All the time.
He can flat out play.
And that guy can go. I will ride with him all the time. And I'll tell you the other guy I really like is Jamon Dumas-Johnson. The guy's going to be a 5th or 6th round pick. I know he's had a couple of injury things, but like that guy is a headhunter. I'll take that guy any day of the week at 180. You know what I mean?
I'm going to give you a name. We'll stay with linebacker here for a minute that is going to be ahead of the curve or talked about more than he is right now coming out of the combine. And it's not going to be because of his 40 and it's not going to be because of his vert or how he looks running bag drills. It's going to be Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina. I think front offices are going to fall in love with him when they talk to him.
He's just not very athletic. That's the only problem.
He can run, though.
He's big.
He can run.
I know, but how good is he laterally?
I think he's good enough laterally.
He's 250 pounds. He's a little bit of a throwback. I think in the 3-4 era, he'd be fine. He's a 2-down linebacker in the NFL. I think that's the part of the problem. Love the guy. He's a good player.
Think because he's a high school quarterback and played the position a little bit in college, even though it's triple option, I think he's got a little bit of those instincts that helps him somewhat. I just think he's going to come out of this with a lot more people saying, hold on now, we may need to reconsider where we have him listed.
I'm great with all of that.
But I am with you on Chris Paul, by the way. I thought he could play at Arkansas. I thought he had a good year at Ole Miss.
Great player.
He can sideline to sideline, taking on blockers. Like there's not a part of it that he can't excel at.
Same team.
But I'm very interested to see Stutzman and how he comes out of this.
Yeah.
Just this process, this part of it. I think Cody Simon could be a guy who flies up draft boards at the combine because this kind of feels like it's made for him. I feel like his workouts on the field are going to wow some folks.
Agree.
But I do agree with you that it feels like just a couple of guys towards the top. And maybe the top guy for a lot of people, Greg, you said this before, we don't know what he plays. Like Jalen Walker is going to have the most wow factor. And I'll say this, Jalen Walker, similar to Demetrius Knight, when folks sit down with him and talk to him,
I'll take that kid.
They're gonna fall. They're gonna say, I don't care where he plays, just get him in our locker room.
Yes, I'll take Jalen Walker all the time. Now he's listed as an edge. I think he's got more in him than that. I mean, okay, on third down, I'll slide him down. That's fine.
Sure.
But I just think I think the depth in this draft. I think Mel Kiper's order is disastrous this year from my vantage point. Like some of the guys that are listed 6th, 7th, 8th at their position, I think are better than the guys that are listed 1, 2, and 3 in some cases. And that's what I'm amazed by. It's not that, that terrible, but I'm trying to figure out, like, for example, edge. Jalen Walker's listed as the 6th best edge. He's 5 spots behind Mykel Williams.
Well, you and I are going to agree he shouldn't be the first edge.
But he should be ahead of Mykel Williams. Is he even really an edge?
I mean, speaking of old schemes, like he feels more like a 4-down defensive end to me.
Talking about Mykel?
Correct.
Well, don't tell him that.
Okay. Well, if I draft you and pay you, I will tell you that. That's the way it's going to go. I mean, sorry. But that's just kind of how it is. But I'm with you. I don't look at him and say, oh, immediately a lot of twitch, a lot of versatility off the edge, and he's going to come in and be able to get to the quarterback. We've mentioned it 100 times on this show. How many times did he actually get to the quarterback in college?
Not enough.
If you're just talking rankings, though,
yeah.
On the other side, Kiper did just release his latest mock. And we'll kind of run through that. There is a surprise change at the top, and be interested to see what some folks think about that, because it does involve a team that has a lot of fans here locally. So we can discuss that, run through that, talk about that. Before we do it, tell our listeners about Shannara Flooring.
Shannara Flooring and Foo, they have built a foundation for their company on trust and integrity. You already know when you call Foo, he's going to have his group out there, and they're going to take great care of your home when they are making changes to your flooring. They're the only contractor here in Central Alabama that has 40,000 square feet of CoreTech flooring by Shaw in stock. It's amazing to know that Shaw, this is waterproof, perfect floors to upgrade the quality of your home, upgrade the value of your home. So to have 40,000 square feet in stock is pretty amazing. So Foo and their company at Shannara Flooring will do an amazing job of taking care of you. You also get 12 months financing with approved credit. So remember, when you're thinking about making some adjustments to your floors, call who? Call Foo. Call them at 205-518-518-6423. That's 205-518-6423. Or go online at fooandyou.com.
All right, let's take a look at Mel Kiper's latest mock next on Mac and Cube in the morning. All right, welcome back in. McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 9:17, Tuesday, February 25th, right here on Jocks 94.5. NFL Draft, where will your team be going early in this draft? You will be interested to see where Mel Kiper has the Tennessee Titans going first overall in his latest mock, which comes out today. A little bit of a change with the Titans at 1, Greg taking Abdul Carter, edge out of Penn State, not Michael Williams.
Numero uno.
First overall.
Number 1.
Not quarterback, not receiver, not offensive line, edge, Abdul Carter. He's a good player.
Very good
player.
You can make a case he's the best overall player. So I'm not like that mad about it, but a little surprising nonetheless. Would you agree?
From a need perspective, I would say I'm a little bit surprised, but is there an all-time wide receiver in this draft?
No.
That deserves to be one? I'm interested to go back to the wide receivers and have that conversation with you. We already discussed the fact that there's not a clear-cut all-time tackle here. So even if you wanted to take Kelvin Banks or Will Campbell, you're not going to take a massive dip with a tackle that you could potentially get a little bit later. Now, I will say this. I think the tackle numbers are light, so do not be surprised if the top 10, 12, 15 picks are heavy on tackle. Because I think after you get past 4 or 5, maybe 6, you're taking a pretty big leap after that.
Hard to push back on that. I think the tackle spot is an interesting one for sure. But I also think that there's a lot of downside risk on a lot of these tackles. The only one I feel real confident in for the long term is probably Will Campbell. I feel real confident about him being a big time player.
Plug and go. I feel like and being a solid player for a long time. And just gonna be
solid. And if worst case scenario, you got to slide him to guard, I can live with that.
Who would be close in your mind to Abdul Carter here off the edge? So if you were saying, okay, Titans want to look at either trading up or other picks a little bit later, who would you look at as to, okay, you could miss Abdul Carter at 1 and potentially find a way to pick up this player a little bit later and still be satisfied with what you were going to get?
I mean, I think Abdul Carter's the best one, but I don't think the drop off from him to Nick Scorton is that significant. I mean, if you wanted to draft a guy at 15 as opposed to 1, I'm okay with going Scorton.
Scorton a little bit more heavy-handed. Probably not going to have the same kind of twitch.
No, definitely not the same kind of twitch.
So
but we'll thump.
Yes, no doubt. Number 2, he has Cam Ward to the Browns. No surprise there whatsoever. Number 3, maybe a little bit of surprise to some folks. Travis Hunter to the Giants.
Is that one surprising?
I think the only reason that people might view it as surprising is
Yeah.
What do the Giants want? What do the Giants think that they're getting there? Potentially best overall football player in the draft, but versatility key. What's the usage going to be on both sides of the ball?
I
don't know. Is he going to be focused on one side?
Is he really going to be playing both positions? I don't know the answer to that. That feels a little unlikely to me, playing both ways in the NFL. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it feels unlikely.
Right. 4, Will Campbell to the Patriots, which you and I would not have any issues with.
Makes a ton of sense. Just put the card in now. Because if you really think about what the Patriots need, what the Patriots probably want, they have a franchise quarterback. I think it'd be in their best interest to sprint to the podium to give that one in, if that's the direction it ends up going.
5, the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has Mason Graham out of Michigan going to the Jags at 5.
I love Mason Graham. I might be in the minority. I love the guy. Because I think there's some people that look at him. He's like, I don't know. Maybe there's a few things they got to figure out. Maybe he's a little limited on the upside, but the guy just plays his tail off every second of every game. I don't know how you don't love the guy. I just don't know.
Yeah, that would be for people who had issues with that. Look at what the Eagles have done inside the last couple of years. Look at what the Chiefs have had inside the last couple of years. Tampa Bay right before that with Vita Vea, what they have had. These teams that are winning Super Bowls have an inside presence.
You think?
And it can change the game. With the quick passing game, denting the pocket, batting balls down is almost as valuable as a sack. And being able to redirect the run game with penetration, it's still valuable in the league, very valuable in a lot of instances. So I would have no issue with it. I would actually love the pick, especially with, I feel like you've gone on the edge and off the ball a couple of times recently. Yeah. So bolster the middle. They've tried to get a couple of steals later, which I actually thought a couple might work out for him. But this is a different guy altogether. Like, this is a game changer inside. 6, he's got Genty to the Raiders. We mentioned that, talked about that. 7, Shedeur Sanders to the Jets.
Whew.
You played there. You know what it's like to be a quarterback at that franchise.
Probably happen. Woody can't help himself. Nothing would surprise me anymore with the Jets.
Both of those Colorado superstars in New York.
I like Shedeur. Like, I feel like we were early in saying this guy's the real deal when a lot of people were like, I don't know, we'll see. Like, I thought we were kind of ahead of the curve there as far as acknowledging his quality. But I also think with Shedeur comes the circus. And I don't know if the circus is best.
Well, with the Jets comes the circus also.
Exactly. That's why it's a problem. It's more fit than anything. Like, I think with Shedeur, he'd be better served going and playing in Jacksonville. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence being there eliminates Jacksonville from the conversation, but he'd be better off in New Orleans. You know, a place that's a little bit further down the radar as far as the amount of attention that gets received, the amount of scrutiny the quarterback's going to get. I also think that Shedeur's got a pretty high floor. I don't think he has a crazy high ceiling, but he's got a pretty high floor. So I like Shedeur. I really do. I think he's going to be a good pro. I just don't know if he's going to be. I don't think he's worth the first overall pick in a year like this. I think he's got a chance to be decent. That's about it.
All right. The Panthers, he's got Jalen Walker out of Georgia at 8. The Saints, Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. I'm kind of going through these somewhat quickly because I don't think any of us have any issues with any of those picks.
Does Tyler Warren need to send Brock Bowers a thank you card?
I would still say no, just because of how good Tyler Warren was last year.
But he's not going. I know Brock Bowers kind of set the table. If not for Brock Bowers' dominance last year,
maybe not.
Number 8. Come on,
I think he changes your offense. I think he changes who you are.
I just don't think Tyler Warren's as twitchy as Brock Bowers.
No, but I also think he's a little more physical, and I think he's a little bit better in contested catches. I think his contested catch radius is a little bit bigger, which can help you in different ways. Yeah, they're definitely different, but like I've said before, they're just different color unicorns. They're both unicorns.
Don't disagree.
So they both offer you things that I think not a lot of other guys are going to be able to offer you up. And that's a position that we didn't really spend a lot of time on, talking about just kind of what it was. I mean, you said that, yeah, it was clear cut number 1. Most people would agree. I think there's a lot to like with Colson Loveland. I
really like Colson Loveland.
I don't know if the separation is to the level of those last 2 we just discussed, but I think he's got enough of it to be able to help you. Mason Taylor's not going to give you as much physically.
I'm not there with Mason Taylor compared to the other guys. Like, I like Helm better than him.
Yeah, I don't think Helm is as athletic as a Mason Taylor. He's not going to run as well or look as smooth, but he did improve his run after the catch last year. And then you have a couple of flyers in this draft, like an Elijah Arroyo out of Miami, who I think is probably going to come out the winner of this combine. I don't know how Harold Fana is going to run. And there always seems like there's a tight end that goes up there and runs like 4.46 and everybody loses their mind.
Fana's going to probably run pretty well, right?
I would think so. Maybe he's the guy that just goes up there and does the Vernon Davis thing and everybody's like, what? And all of a sudden,
who's this guy?
Never seen him.
He can play.
I don't think he's that much of an unknown, but I do think he has a chance to kind of, I think if there's a guy who wows physically, it's going to be Arroyo. I think he'll run well. I think running routes, he's going to look extremely smooth. He's going to look super athletic. He's going to be explosive. And then you're going to get your guys that are just different, like Priestcorn and CJ Dupree, Robbie Utes. They just do different things for you. If you need that, you want that, you'll have them later.
Yeah, those are like situational guys though. Right. Like, I mean, I you can have Priestcorn. I'm not there. I I like Robbie Utes. I just know he might catch 7 passes in his
he's
career.
just limited, but he'll help you on teams and he'll do some different things.
Yeah,
for
like
you.
I think he's a good piece. He's just not a guy that I'm anticipating having much contribution offensively as far as my weaponry is concerned. Like he's there as a fullback, and there's plenty of places that you can utilize a fullback. Ricard from Baltimore is 300 pounds
Absolutely.
and has a great role, but that's kind of the role I would envision for Utes, more the Ricard role as opposed to a guy that's ever going to contribute much with his pass catching ability.
I would agree with that. Bringing Stool's a guy that I feel like was supposed to be up where we were talking about those other guys. I just don't know if specifically Warren and Loveland, he offers you physically anything close to what those guys do. Ability to run, move.
I like Bringing Stool as a receiver. He's got great length.
That's it.
But he's not a guy that I want
He's
trying
not
to
wow
secure
you
the
physically.
edge.
Yeah. No, if he gets left alone in protection.
He looks the part, though. Like, I think
There's
people are going to look at him.
That's why I said I thought he should have
say-
been there.
Like, people are going to look at him and say, okay, like, all right, I like the way that guy looks. He's got length. He's got some wow factor. Like, there's some wow plays that you see when you watch him. I mean, he'll make some plays. You're like, whoa, that was big time. And then he'll disappear for 2 games. You know, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around because it feels like he's a tight end that can stretch the field vertically. You got to appreciate that always. But he also is a guy that I feel like doesn't have the natural feel for the position the way I would like for a big body tight end to have feel for the position.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like he doesn't play as big as he should.
It's totally fair, and I think tight end's going to be an interesting position to watch because after those first 2, it's going to get very different very quickly. We'll get to the rest of Kuiper's mock on the other side, discuss kind of what we like, don't like next on Mac and Cube in the morning. Today's financial news that will surprise you, not necessarily from our friends at Freedom Financial. Not sure how much assistance Mike Miller would have needed once he neared retirement. A weird wormhole of a Teddy Bridgewater audio clip in the break of why he did not attend Miami led us to this. The OG show is the show that he was on with Udonis Hasselman and Mike Miller. Mike Miller played 17 years in the NBA. 17.
It's a decent run.
What would you estimate his career earnings to be?
Oh, my gosh.
I think you're probably going to overstate it because it with the recent money the last 4 or 5 years, but it's still pretty staggering.
97 mil.
98.551 million.
That is sick. I was within
basically
$1.5 million.
Yeah.
Let's ride.
$98 million for Mike Miller.
What about taxes? How much federal withholding?
Played 3 years in Orlando, 5 in Memphis, half in Minnesota, half in Washington, 3.5 more in Miami, another half between Cleveland and Miami. So he had a lot of.
So basically,
he
Miami
lost a lot of state income taxes.
Memphis, you're in good shape.
Yeah, and then he had
Orlando,
a little bit of Cleveland, a little bit of Denver,
yeah,
a little bit of Washington.
You're in great shape.
Yeah, he's doing just
no
fine.
Concerns.
I don't think he's in trouble anytime soon.
I think he'll be all right.
You think he's going to be okay?
Especially if they abolish the IRS.
Yeah.
Stop getting political, dude.
No, I just said that he made $98 million. It was a little surprising.
I think he's all right. But yeah, I was an interesting clip that you played about why Teddy Bridgewater didn't go to Miami.
Yeah, you guys didn't hear it, but it's, essentially he said because he was recruited, he was committed to Randy Shannon, not to Miami. Randy Shannon got fired. Al Golden came in. He didn't connect with his spirit, and so he ended up at Louisville. That's recruiting stories. It just that's kind of how they go sometimes.
Recruiting.
Sometimes it's an assistant. Sometimes it's the head coach. Sometimes it's multiple coaches. He mentioned a couple other coaches that were on staff that also went to Louisville that his family had connections with through where his mom and he both went to high school, which is just kind of crazy to think about.
Crazy.
And, but yeah, I always wonder, Greg, what makes people good recruiters? I've talked to a lot of different coaches. Like, how are you good at this? How do you, like Jeremy Pruitt being a great recruiter has always surprised me. He's like, all you got to do is just know how to talk to them. Okay.
Talk to the kids.
It's been developing a relationship. And, how do you do that? Specifically you, how do you do that? Because sometimes it just doesn't feel like it would fit and then they end up being great at it.
Yep.
It's just that you know how to talk to them. You know how to connect with them. He obviously fantastic at that. Certain guys are. Certain guys
I would
aren't.
not be good at recruiting.
I don't think I'd be good at it at all. Not in the least.
Nope. What'd you say you wanted? Get out. You play D-tackle, my defense.
You play where we tell you to play.
You ain't dictating nothing.
In our what? Brad Smith tweets in Eddie Graham, good recruiter. Great recruiter, by the way. And somebody that I'm good friends with. But yeah, you wouldn't meet Eddie in 5 minutes and be like, oh, I bet that guy recruits his rear end off.
He can recruit him.
He gets him. You don't think that. That's not
that guy knows how to recruit him.
Think of. But yeah, it's just it's kind of interesting where certain guys just end up being great recruiters. They just have that it factor about them. Kind of like your CBD store. If you're looking for an it factor to help you with sleep, to lose some weight, the Trim by Sunmed on the shelves now at the largest brick-and-mortar retailer in the world. Skincare, gut health for you or your pet. How about arthritis or anxiety? They have products that will help you with that. Products that will help your pet with that as well. Your CBD store, first company to have USDA certified organic oil supplements. They have the stamp seal on those products. So they're going to meet and achieve a certain set of standards and tests that were signed off on. Your CBD store has great customer service in 3 locations to help you. Highway 280 by Bailey Brothers, 150 by the Cage in Cleaver. Trustful just off 459. Your CBD store where good health hits home. Let's roll back into some of Kuiper's mock draft where he has a couple of other guys coming off the board. You have 2. We stopped at 9, which was Tyler Warren to the Saints. Nobody going to debate that one. 10, the Chicago Bears, Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State.
Are we sure we like the Josh Warren to the Saints?
I like Tyler Warren anywhere.
Tyler Warren to
I like
the Saints.
Tyler Warren anywhere.
Okay.
So, John, you are the resident Saints fan. Would you be happy, sad, wondering about Tyler Warren to the Saints?
I'd be perfectly fine with it. The Saints had a chance. The Raiders picked right before them last year and took Brock Bowers, and he was kind of falling. I kind of would want that. Taysom Hill's coming off an ACL. While the Saints their defensive line is aging out and or expensive, that might be the play. But with some of the best ones, according to this mock, already gone, why not go with a guy? Because I believe Kellen Moore, he loves having a tight end in his offense. So why not get someone that's extremely versatile for a brand new regime?
Especially a move coach pre-snap is going to have people in different places like Kellen Moore is. I think Tyler Warren's a fantastic weapon. Josh Simmons to the Bears at 10. I think you got a little bit of a rolling of the dice regardless, but he would be one of the 2 or 3 there that if you had to go tackle that you would heavily consider taking. The injury is obviously a little bit of a concern, but Kelvin Banks still there would probably be the only one that you're really debating with. But either way, if that's your position of need, you take them. San Francisco, Kuiper has Will Johnson out of Michigan at 11 off the board. Cowboys.
Good player.
Very good player. Cowboys, Amarian Hampton, running back at 12. We talked about who was next, and you discussed it. You brought him up, and we both agree, Greg, Amarian Hampton, maybe the closest to Genty in this draft.
Yes.
For some different reasons. They are different in different ways. But I wouldn't have an issue with it.
No, there's no problems with that at all.
You're set at quarterback. You're set at receiver. Feels like you're set at tight end. Now, your offensive line, you could maybe address again, but I feel like you
can never address offensive line enough.
No, but you hit a home run with Rico Dowdle, and then you're going to add a guy that has a lot more juice. And you can still have your 1-2 punch and now have it somebody that's going to be a little bit more of a home run hitter. 13, Dolphins taking Armand Mimbu, tackle out of Missouri, who you hate, but is by far the best right tackle in this draft.
I don't hate him. I just don't. I'm not one that would draft a guy that can play only one position if I'm going to draft him that high. Like if I'm taking an offensive lineman, like I need to know he can play left and right. God forbid something happens to my left tackle and he's got to slide over. I got to know he can do that. And I don't know I can do that with him.
Well, it was an interesting tweet that E. Robinson sent into the show a few moments ago. Unless you're just trying to mash everyone in the run game, you only play super high value on a right tackle if you have a franchise left-handed quarterback, correct? What team is that? Well, that would be the Miami Dolphins, actually.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
If Miami went and drafted him.
And maybe whoever takes Max Johnson after next year. Certain people will tell you.
That's your guy.
The Colts take Malachi Starks at 14. I thought he was slipping on the draft boards.
I don't think Malachi Starks had a great year. Personal opinion. I don't think he necessarily cost himself some money, but I think his year this year left a little to be desired.
Okay.
You not agree or no?
No doubt. 100%.
Hate that, but it's the truth.
In maybe the first, now from an ability standpoint, you're not stretching with Starks. Maybe in the first real stretch that Kuiper goes with is at 15 to the Falcons, where he has Atlanta taking Mike Green, outside linebacker Marshall.
I am just not familiar with him.
Hot name right now.
Everyone's buzzing about him. I don't know anything about the guy. I'm not saying he can't play. I'm just saying I don't ever remember him being a guy. I've seen Marshall, by the way.
Got to the quarterback at a pretty regular rate, and somebody who I think if you're looking for pass rush prowess with a little versatility, the direction that you would want to go. But that one will surprise some people based on what was still available.
Yes.
The Cardinals at 16, he's got Shamar Stewart. Neither one of us are going to be upset about that.
No, never upset about
Put him
Shamar
opposite
Stewart.
Zaven Collins, and you're off and running.
Done.
Versatility, inside, outside, power, twitch. Guy's got it all.
Got everything you want.
Bengals, Mykel Williams out of Georgia. God, that feels like a Bengals pick.
He'll probably go on and have a great career.
17, Mykel Williams to the Bengals. You like that? Yes or no?
I'm not a huge fan. I think Mykel Williams has flashed. I've just never gotten it consistently enough to feel great about him going this high. And I want it to work for him. I want him to be the guy. But I, at this point, can't feel confident about putting him in that position. Can you?
No.
Okay.
A couple Bama guys next. Seattle taking Tyler Booker at 18. Bucks taking Jihad Campbell at 19. Then Denver goes Colson Loveland, which would be I would love that pick there. Steelers Emeka Egbuka.
Are you a Denver guy?
No, but I think Colson Loveland's a good player.
He is a good player.
Bo left him though.
Steelers with Egbuka at 21. Chargers Tetiora McMillan at 22.
You like him?
I love it. They've had success with bigger physical receivers in the past. I think he's a guy that obviously he's not going to do as much over the middle of the field in the NFL, but down the field, he's a problem. And you got your quarterback, the O-line set. You've addressed it. Now you go get a down the field weapon that can be a difference maker that not a lot of people have a lot of interest for. I think it's a great pick for the Chargers, especially at 22. You disagree?
No, I'm great with it. I got no problem with him.
Vikings.
I just thought you hated it.
Gray Zabel, center guard out of North Dakota State at 24.
Is he good? What's his name?
Gray Zabel.
That's about right. What school?
North Dakota State.
Yeah, that's
the
a
Bison.
lock. That's a lock.
Texans at 25, Kelvin Banks Jr. I think there's pretty good value there. Rams, Josh Connerly out of Oregon at 26. So the tackle run, according to Mel, is going to begin bottom of the first. Baltimore, Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina. Kind of Maxwell Harrison to the Redskins at 29.
He's got to play.
That would be my number one concern there. Is I need you on the field. How about Mel has the Eagles taking Walter Nolan at 32?
I mean, if they took Walter Nolan, that's just so dirty.
Goodness gracious.
I mean,
how are you going to get him on the field?
It's so dirty. I just don't know what you do. I mean, you just keep rolling them.
Just keep putting out big time players.
That way, if he needs a nap in the third quarter, he can go.
You got the other guy out there that can help you with that. All right. When we come back, there was a current SEC coach that apparently took a shot at one of the all-time greats this league has seen. We'll discuss it right after this on Mac and Cube in the morning. All right, welcome back. Yeah, McElroy and Cubelic in the morning. 3-man front coming at you next live from Soho Taco. You can stop by, see the guys, grab some lunch there, hang out. An interesting comment or comments yesterday, GMAC, from Georgia head coach Kirby Smart. You able to hear these? Did you see these yesterday?
I did.
Kirby at a coaching convention, the Nike Coach of the Year clinic, when discussing quarterbacks, had a slide created with Bryce Young, Joe Burrow, Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton. Asked, what did these players have in common? Quote, he ain't no champion. Champion of what? Champion of Fireball? To which I think some people sort of understand where he was going with that.
Yeah.
But when you heard the commentary, what were your immediate thoughts, your immediate reaction?
I mean, quick chuckle, but I do think it's interesting that you have 4 guys that won the Heisman Trophy, 2 of which won national championships. But I think clearly Kirby, it was a joke. I don't know why everyone is making such a huge deal out of it. It was a joke. And he was a guy that gave Kirby Smart a lot of fits in 2012 and 2013 when he was the defense coordinator at Alabama. So I'm sure there's probably a little disdain for how good Johnny Manziel was. That's probably about it. I
think it's fair.
I didn't think that much of it.
I think it's fair for that to be brought up. 2012, Manziel, 24 of 31, 253, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He ran 18 times for 92 yards. 2013, that was a win. In a loss, 28 of 39, 464, 5 touchdowns, 2 picks, ran 14 times for 98 yards. So he put 500 on him the second year.
500.
That's okay.
Not bad.
It's pretty decent. He turned it over twice, but hey, you'll take the 500 with that.
He can play. And no one, look, like him, dislike him, however you feel about Johnny Manziel, that dude could play. He was a handful, not scared. Man. He was a player. And you got to respect that. His personal situation aside, you put him on the field, it's hell on wheels now. You gotta give credit to that. I will always give credit to guys that could ball like that.
Nobody's going to take anything away from what he was as a gamer and what he could do on the field in pads. He was just beyond dangerous every single down, every series. Now,
monster.
Are you going to take a little bit of the bad with the good? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But and then some of the other aspects of it off the field, you're going to get a little extra, but the guy produced.
The guy can play now.
There's no doubt about it.
You don't have to like the guy, but you got to acknowledge that you didn't want him on the other team.
Well, and some of the things that people used against him as his career went on to the NFL may have been some of the things that helped him a little bit more in college. And that how do you coach against a guy that's unpredictable to his own staff? Unpredictable to his own teammates.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the plan that you devise for somebody who is going against his own grain, going against his own scheme and offense? I mean,
right.
There weren't a lot of things that you could do to draw up as a perfect plan to be able to slow down Manziel, because hell, Manziel didn't know what he was going to do half the time.
Yes. That's what I think is so tough about defending him, is that he was undefendable because you never knew which direction he might go. The guy had no tendencies. You'd think you'd have him bottled up. Oh, he rolls. You watch all these guys like, oh, they roll to their right. He's a right-handed guy. Rolls right. Manziel would roll right, twist back, roll back, undercut, and then back out the gate. I mean, he was a very difficult player to defend. And I think he is one of just a small percentage of players that were absolutely 100% must-watch television. There is not a lot of players that have played in the last 15, 20 years that every single time they stepped on the field, you felt like you had to watch them. I can probably count on one hand how many guys that were
and definitely wanted
like
to watch
that. And like you would do whatever, like what time is the A&M game? Right. I'm watching Johnny. Reggie Bush was that way. You never knew what he was going to do. The guy was just insane. He was so much better than everybody else. It was insane.
Quentin Nelson was that guy.
Who?
Quentin Nelson.
For the Joe Moore committee, sure.
For me.
Good. I'm glad you liked him. But he would not necessarily crack the top 5 for me. Great player, but not must-watch television.
Who's in your top 5, like, most must-see college football players of your lifetime? Manziel, Bush, who else?
I got to think about it.
I'm going to put Cam up there. We get it. You don't have to admit it. It's fine.
That's soft tissue again.
It's fine. You don't have to.
Cam would probably be up there. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think like maybe McFadden might be in mine.
Michael Vick.
That was one that you wanted to know when he was playing.
Yes. Michael Vick would be one. Gosh, I'll tell you another one was Christian McCaffrey. Like,
oh boy.
It's like, whoa. You know what I mean?
I will say this, and see, my list is going to be a little bit different. Like, as the year went on, I know it wasn't a very long run, but Quinnen Williams became one of those guys for me. Just because he did so much inside that the other guys couldn't do.
I love so much how you just love the trenches. Watch
how do you not
split this double team?
How do you not?
I'm not mad at you for it. Lamar Jackson. I mean, if I'm putting together my short list of guys that like were absolute must-watch television, I'm stopping everything I'm doing to watch what they're doing. Is Mike Vick, some combination of Michael Vick, Reggie Bush, Johnny Manziel, Lamar Jackson, and probably Christian McCaffrey. Those are like the 5. It's like, whoa. You know what I mean? Where it's just, they're not fair. I mean, they're just flat out not fair.
Yeah, there's not much you can do about it. I mean, it's just they were going to dominate you either way. So it just kind of where it was going to be and where it was going to go. It's God, there's so many more that continue to come out too that you're just thinking of. Like, you make fun of me with Kevin Falk, but like he was one of those guys for me as well. I love that you laugh about it, and you just
I do laugh at it.
You don't know, and so that's fine.
I tell you what, there's another guy too who's a big 2-gapper at Tennessee. I really liked watching him.
John Henderson, he was fun to watch.
Yeah, Johnny
Albert
Henderson.
Hainsworth was fun to watch in college.
Al Hainsworth.
Give him a run.
Give him a big run. I've lived Deion Walker at Kentucky.
Nick Fairley may have been one of those guys because when he turned it on, he was unblockable.
As long as you only watched 8 plays a game, you were going to really be entertained by what you got from Fairley.
It was a good 8, though.
They were a good 8. Speaking of 8, 8-time national champion Bill Smith Buick GMC. They're just up the short drive, up I-65 exit 310, Highway 31. You'll see what I'm talking about when you step on the lot. There's a reason why they've won 5 consecutive Dealer of the Year awards, according to General Motors. You just get a better experience when you shop with Bill Smith. Go and see for yourself. You can get Yukons for over $10,000 off the sticker. You can get GMC Sierra 1500 SLT with the X31 off-road package, $10,000 off the sticker. It's deals like that keep people come back. That's why 75% of their business repeat customers, because you have a better experience when you shop at Bill Smith's. Take the short drive to Coleman. You'll be glad you did. You can also shop online. Have to right to your driveway at BillSmithBuickGMC.com.
All right, when we come back tomorrow, we will recap Alabama, Mississippi State on the hardwood. We will preview Auburn and Ole Miss. That game 5:30, airing right here on Jocks 94.5. 3-man front coming at you next, live from Soho Tacos. You can stop by, check out the guys, grab some great food, and get some good company with 3-man front there at Soho Taco. They're next. Paul Feinbo follows them. We are back tomorrow, 7 to 10 a.m. right here on Jocks 94.5.